Okay. I would like to call the regular meeting to order. Welcome, everybody, to the first board meeting of the new year. Happy New Year. And at least speaking for myself, I'm really glad that 2020 is in the rearview mirror. Marcy, you can go ahead and start. Oh, she did start recording. Okay. A recording and/or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, and the recording and/or broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. I'd now like to call the roll. Jessica Spicer.
Here.
Steve Taglio.
Here.
Brian Johnson.
Here.
Vladimir Ivanovic.
Here.
And I too am here. All right, moving along. Would any board member like to provide comment on the agenda? Nope. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, can I have a second?
I'll second.
I'm going to give it to Jessica. Okay, the motion was made by Vladimir and seconded by Jessica. We'll do a roll call vote. Jessica Spicer.
Yes.
Steve Taglio. I think that was a yes, if I read your lips correctly. Brian Johnson.
Yes.
Vladimir Ivanovic.
Yes.
I too vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. On to closed session report. No action was taken in closed session, but we will be returning to closed session after this meeting. Right, moving right along, staff celebration. Katie 2, Gardner Bullis and virtual school teacher, will be recognized for earning her national board certification. Mrs. McGonigal.
Absolutely. So we want to give a huge congratulatory shout out to Katie 2, who is in a typical year, an outstanding primary teacher at Gardner Bullis. And this year she is also teaching primary in our virtual school. But the National Board Certification is a really intensive process where teachers commit to a couple of years to go through some deep cycles of inquiry with their students in their classroom and really to hone in on their practice. It's something that we've encouraged our teachers in LASD to do, and we do have several national board certified teachers, but just thinking of Katie's commitment during this time to her craft is really incredible. So we are so proud of you, Katie. I can't remember if she has just gone out on leave or just about to go out on leave, but Katie is going to be going out on maternity leave shortly if she hasn't already. But Katie, we love you and we're so proud of your dedication to your kids and your craft. And thanks for being an exemplary LASD teacher.
Well, I think she deserves a round of applause.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are certainly very proud of Katie. Superintendent's update, Jeff?
Yeah, actually, Shelley, I embedded a couple of update items into a presentation this evening, so I think we can just move to, I'll just wait until we get to that.
Okay. We're going to move on to the consent items. Would any of my board members like to provide comment on the consent items? Okay, seeing none. Can I have a motion to approve consent items E1 through E4?
I'd like to move to approve consent on items E1 through E4 as presented.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jessica. Motion was made by Vladimir, seconded by Jessica. We'll now do a roll call vote. Jessica Spicer.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I too vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. All right, employee requests to address the board. Will Ricky Hu speak on behalf of Los Altos Teachers Association? Oh, there's Ricky.
Oh, first, big shout out to Katie. Heck of a year to do national boards, and it's a tremendous amount of work. So shout out to her. Board members, I first want to acknowledge all the tremendous work from you, from LASD staff, and from educators that have gone into making this year as enriching and as effective for students as circumstances allow. However, we all know that we've entered into an unprecedented time in our county. There are more positive coronavirus cases than any time before. And this has resulted in a tremendous amount of stress, anxiety, and fear on the part of our teachers, and I'm sure many families as well. So LATA as an organization has an obligation to respond to these concerns and the changing circumstances with the virus. And my hope is that you hear and understand your employees' perspective at this time. Ultimately, our shared goal is to ensure the safety of all staff and students in light of our current health situation. So on behalf of educators in LASD and on behalf of LATA, we're asking to engage in discussions through our negotiations with staff to amend our MOU so that instruction remains virtual until the county goes to red tier or until staff have an opportunity to receive a vaccine, whichever comes first. We do not take our current actions lightly, and we recognize that there is no perfect solution during this unprecedented year, but we value our partnership and know we must work together to allow for the safest possible conditions at this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Do we have anyone from the California School Employees Association?
I don't think we have anyone speaking on behalf of CSEA tonight, Shelley.
Okay. Then I'd like to move on to community comments. This time is reserved for citizens and employees to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items, except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make a brief comment or ask clarifying questions. So we will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is Dari Shalan.
Hello and good evening. I'm Dari Shalom, the parent to 4 kids in the school district. And while I understand that it's much safer for the teachers for the school to remain virtual, when we look at the risks, I think there's no evidence to date that opening the schools in our neighboring counties has led to any increased infection. There have been no new orders at the state or county level not to open the schools. Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Gardner, Bullis are all open with no higher infection rates reported. So the district and the schools have all done a great job putting systems and procedures in place to minimize exposure risks. So as a parent, I feel that teachers are essential workers. And as essential workers, Los Altos teachers shouldn't be making up their own rules of when they do or do not feel like going back to teach in person, much like the police and healthcare workers aren't allowed to petition to perform their duties virtually. So while we're trying to balance the risk, we need to also consider the risk of continuing in a virtual model indefinitely. Our kids at home are suffering emotionally, academically, socially. The virtual model is failing my children. 80% of Los Altos School District parents want their kids back in school. And while we're all concerned for the health of the school staff, keeping school virtual for the benefit of the teachers is clearly the bigger risk here. Please listen to the voice of the parents and open our schools.
Marcy, before you call the next speaker, Jeff, can I just ask any comments about opening the schools, reopening the schools? Should that wait until item H2 since it's on the agenda?
I think it can land in either place. It was Ricky's lead comment. So I think allowing these folks lined up to either speak now or speak at agenda item 2 is fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Marcy. You can call the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Shushama Reddy.
Hi, this is Sushma Reddy. I'm a healthcare provider and a parent. Over the last 9+ months, we've learned a great deal about how to protect ourselves. I'm wondering if there's some way the teachers could ask us questions so we can try and allay some of their fears and help make this a safer environment for them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Annie Said.
Hi, I'm Annie Sood. I have 2 children in school at Gardner Bullis, and I just wanted to ask for more information from the teachers. I highly respect our teachers in this district and at Gardner in particular. As a family, we've tripled down since September. We have had virtually no one come into our house. Actually, no one has come into our house in September. We have worked incredibly hard to work. I have a toddler. We have her wearing a mask. It's an incredible amount of work, and we've done it with a view towards keeping teachers safe. So this is near and dear to my heart. And I would love to know if there's any way that parents and the PTA can support teachers in feeling safer in our environment. If there's behaviors that are occurring that shouldn't occur, I would love to help assist teachers in addressing those behaviors. The problem with the vaccine is that the rollout is taking longer than it should, than any of us want it to. And this could be tantamount to closing the school for the rest of the year. And if that is the case, I would rather us just go to virtual for the rest of the year than to have the trauma after trauma of these fits and starts of we're going to school, we're not going to school, because as a family, we are so hyper-focused on keeping our community safe. And when it's really emotionally devastating for my entire family, but my girls in particular, to have these Friday night surprises and to have, sort of to feel that we're not included in the conversation, and that we are we get the Friday night shock. And so I would plead with you as a parent, if there's any way for us to help address concerns in a way that is actionable on our end, I would love to be a part of that. And I know I'm not alone in there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carrie Williamson.
Hi, my name is Carrie Williamson. I am a parent of 2 Loyola students, and I'm really pleased at the comments that I've heard so far in the tone, and that's the main reason that I wanted to speak this evening. I think we're all here for the same objective. We want our students and teachers and staff to be learning in person in a safe environment. And I understand that a lot of parents feel very strongly about wanting their students to be educated in person, and recognizing those benefits to in-person learning. And that's very valid. At the same time, I understand that our teachers have very real concerns about their health and safety, not just of themselves, but of their family members. And so I hope that as everyone speaks this evening, that everyone realizes we're trying to reach a common goal. And the more that we can speak in ways to facilitate solutions for everybody involved, including advocating for both our students and our teachers and staff. In that vein, if there are safety precautions that the teachers are asking for, like temperature checks on entry, weekly or biweekly COVID tests, holding classes outside, anything that would help them feel more comfortable. I hope that the board, to the extent possible, and all of the parents can help make these steps possible, so that we can reach our common goal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jeannie Tsai.
Hi, Thank you so much for taking the time to consider all sides. I'm a parent at Loyola and Block and track the local COVID numbers daily. Mountain View, Los Altos, and Los Altos all have experienced a drastic increase within the past few weeks, and it's not just San Jose or some faraway neighborhood. While it's true that the case numbers among younger students are low, that may be partially because most students in the county have not been in class. Low also does not mean zero. Within Loyola, for example, our one fourth grade class had a positive case on their first day back at school in December. While I sympathize greatly with those with younger kids or those with higher needs, I would like to point out something. You know how annoyed you get, or at least I do, when you receive one of those head lice exposure emails? Imagine how anxious you'd feel when you're the one who received a COVID exposure notice, and how disruptive it would be if your child had to quarantine for 2 weeks. In addition, the transmission rate for the new UK strain appears to be higher among kids, and we also have upper graders and middle schoolers to consider. LASD has always touted our partnership with the teachers, staff, and parents. Personally, I feel the union's ask is very reasonable. Let's wait until the county's numbers have gone down as a whole and we're in red tier for 2 weeks, or all the teachers and staff have received their vaccines. Our schools can't run if we don't have our teachers and staff. They have absolutely given their 150% to educate our kids, and we need to support them in return now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily Simon.
Hi, my name is Emily Simon, and I teach fourth grade at Almond, and I am in my fourth year teaching with LASD, and I did not go to school today. In December, when we were hybrid for a week, I spent my 40-minute commute to school every day in tears, deciding between my life and my job each morning. On Thursday morning of that week, I realized how insane it was that I had been picking my job over my safety each and every day. There will be many jobs in my life, but I only get one life. As many teachers in this district, I'm here because of the students. I know they learn best in person. I know that they are struggling being separated from their friends, their teachers. I know that parents are struggling to manage at-home school, especially for our youngest students. But we closed our schools in the spring and fall for the safety of our community, parents, students, teachers, and staff. On Saturday, Santa Clara and San Francisco, which is where I live, both recorded their highest cases and deaths in one day to date. In the worst of this pandemic, I can no longer suffer the emotional pain of the decision between my job and my students and my health. At this time, I am considering a leave of absence. And while I make that choice that makes sense for me, I'd still like to stand for the teachers who do not have the financial privilege to be without income. I speak on behalf of the teachers who also wish to take a leave to protect themselves or their loved ones, but are forced to put them at risk to keep their homes and keep food on the table. These are impossible decisions. But returning to virtual until teachers and staff can be vaccinated or until we return to red tier is not an impossible decision. It's one that the majority of schools in the Bay Area and California at large have made. I urge the board to return our schools to virtual. Our students deserve the best teachers we have here, and I hope that by valuing the health and safety of our teachers and staff, no students will have to lose a teacher that they love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Stephanie Penman Elephant.
Hi, my question is more in the regards to process. I guess I'd first like to just acknowledge, I appreciated everyone's comments, and I am particularly would like to just support the kids going back to in-person learning. But again, my question or comment is in regards to process. And I'm not sure if someone can help clarify who ultimately will decide whether our children will go back into the classroom. Is it the board or is it the teachers union itself? Would someone be able to answer that question? Maybe not now, but maybe if you're going to answer at the end.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie.
Our next speaker is Jim Yang.
Hi, this is actually Nancy Yang. Both Jim and I would like to speak tonight, and I'm speaking first. We are Loyola parents, and I am probably one of the very few parents that is also a teacher outside of LASD. But I'm wanting to talk to everyone and to talk to the board in full support of our teachers who deserve our respect and consideration. And as professionals that they are, we've seen they've given of themselves in the past year in ways that we really cannot even imagine. And we must support them as they fight for their own health and safety. We signed our children up for hybrid instruction with great hope this pandemic would be under control for in-person school to occur. That has not yet happened. And in fact, it has worsened to a great degree. Waiver or no waiver, we are under stay-at-home orders with the true crisis happening in our hospitals. And I think it would be irresponsible and frankly inconsiderate to send them into a situation that will not only put them at risk, but also cause a great deal of unneeded anxiety, which is certainly not conducive to creativity for lesson planning. I can assure you of that. As a teacher myself, I understand the anxiety and the difficulty to adequately teach in such a situation. Additionally, I know of the diminishing morale for teachers throughout our country, where it seems to be the assumption that teachers should shoulder the burdens of society and put their own lives at risk. As a parent, I fully support the union in their request that teachers return to in-person school when the county has been in the red tier for 2 weeks, or when all teachers have gone through the vaccination process, which is reportedly coming as soon as a few weeks from now. This request is, in my opinion, reasonable and worthy of 100% community support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Megan.
Excuse me. Why don't we take these next two and then we'll save any others for the agenda item.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Megan Greenbaum.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, and thank you for all the work that you do for the teachers and students of Los Altos School District. I'm an 8th grade science teacher at Block. I love my job, and I would much rather be teaching in the classroom, but I don't feel comfortable returning to in-person instruction at this time. Excuse me. The case numbers are higher than they have ever been. And they are continuing to rise with no end in sight. Sorry about that. The new variant strain is seeming to be more transmissible. There is not much known about it. And as of yesterday, there were 0 standard ICU beds available in the county. As a middle school teacher, I'm going to be seeing around 120 students a week. And the thought of returning to the classroom and putting the health and well-being of my family at risk has caused me such anxiety and stress. And I feel trapped with having to choose between my job and the health and well-being of my family. I urge you to make the decision that will ensure the health and safety of both the staff and the students. And I think that's to keep us in remote instruction at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final speaker is Gina Osberg.
Hello, so my name is Gina Osberg and it is my 11th year teaching 8th grade science at Egan. I'm speaking tonight because I do want to ask the board to delay the reopening of our schools. And I know, as we've heard, I am not the only teacher that is incredibly uncomfortable and concerned with our safety, especially the proposed hybrid model at the junior highs, which I think when we compare to the CDC recommendations for schools, it ranks at a medium risk of transmission, which with everything going on right now is just too high. Our students are learning. It's not perfect, but we have worked so hard over the last 10 months to stay safe that with our hospitalization and death rates in Santa Clara County just climbing astronomically, it is not the time to be reopening. And I think it is important to realize that at the junior high level, we will be implementing new practices, new safety procedures, a new schedule, things that we have not tested before. And we are looking at doing that at the highest risk point that we've been at. I understand the concerns as a parent. I have a 2nd grader that's virtual schooling. He's in the Burlingame School District. You know, I know how challenging it is. I know the stress that comes with it and the emotional side for our students. But I also think that we need to wait until things are safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your comments. We're going to move on now to action and discussion items. First on the agenda, disclosure of proposed collective bargaining agreement. Los Altos Teachers Association. Staff will present the financial impact of the proposed collective bargaining agreement with the Los Altos Teachers Association. Mr. Kenyon.
Thank you, Shali. Under state law, we're required to disclose to the public prior to any finalization of proposed tentative agreements between any of our bargaining units and the district over salary and other issues that relate to their contracts. Tonight, we are disclosing to you the financial implications of a recent tentative agreement we've reached with Los Altos Teachers Association. And this is for discussion only. It's not an action item. The law states that we disclose this information publicly, and then at a subsequent meeting, you will have an opportunity to act on this particular tentative agreement. So tonight, again, it's just discussion only. The agreement we've reached with the teachers is a 3-year contractual agreement. Regarding the financial implications, it has to do with compensation. And the compensation we have settled over a 2% across the board salary increase for the current 2021 school year and the subsequent year, 21-22, and with a possible reopener in the 3rd year of the agreement, 22-23. We also have both parties reserve the right to reopen on 2 other articles of the contract. You can see from the disclosure that you've reviewed that the cost implications of a 2% salary increase, it's roughly a little over $500,000 a year for the teachers. And you can also see that we that have more than enough funds in reserve, even after these raises, to be well above the 3% required minimum reserve level required by the state. So I am going to, and you also see at the bottom of the disclosure that both the superintendent, Jeff, and I have signed that we certify that we can meet our financial obligations based on the disclosure of this tentative agreement with the Teachers Association. So with that said, I'm just going to turn it back to you, Shali, for any board questions or discussion.
Great, thank you, Randy. Are there any questions, clarifying questions from the board members regarding Randy's presentation? Okay, seeing none. We'll have public comment. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes. Oh, sorry, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Marcy. You can call on folks.
Our first speaker is Roberta Pine.
Good evening, board. Roberta Pine here, bargaining chair. And I just wanted to give you a brief comment here about how challenging it is to bargain in any year, but even more so in a pandemic year. And I just want you to understand that we have been using our interest-based bargaining to benefit our members, our students, our staff, and our community. And I thank you for the good relationship that we have and continue to have. And we are pleased to see that a salary increase that's going to be ongoing can meet all of our interests and attract and retain our high quality teachers that are well educated, dedicated, not only our teachers, but our psychologists, our speech pathologists. And in this climate of a global pandemic, it brings new areas for us to address in our interest-based bargaining sessions. So we want to continue an open and frank dialogue about how it's impacting our members and our students and how we can help educate them. So we continue to look forward to a collective and collaborative work with our administration to meet all of our interests. So thank you very much for a time to speak tonight.
Thank you, Roberta.
Our next speaker is Laura Jaffe.
Good evening and thank you. I'm Laura Jaffe and I teach TK at Springer Elementary School. Ever since I was 6 years old in first grade at Hillview Elementary School, I made the decision to be a teacher. I love teaching and I love working with children. I wanted to talk because with the ICU units at 99% and 35,000 deaths in California, and that number is expected to double by April, the stay-at-home order is still in place. We need to be safe, stay home, and work virtually. Maslow's hierarchy of needs says safety is the most important. It's the priority. We need to teach virtually until we're vaccinated or the stay-at-home order is lifted and we're out of the purple tier. Today, I had 2 students in my in-person classroom from that cohort. 3 of them were in quarantine because of traveling. 1 parent also made the decision to keep her child at home for safety. And the rest of the class was in cohort B, which I won't see until Thursday and Friday. So all of them were doing online learning from the learning plan at home. And I had 2 students in my classroom. By the end of the day, I had 1 because 1 child needed to go home to use the bathroom. He didn't want to use it at school. So I feel for the majority of my students who are at home since I'm in the classroom with 2 students instead of meeting online and teaching all of them. Right now, we're learning the building blocks of phonemes and phonics, and they need to see my mouth, make the sounds, and I need to see theirs. I can't with masks on, and it's not safe to take them off to do that. Virtually, I can teach without a mask. I can make sure my whole class is getting the same material. I can meet with them 5 times a day. I can see what their progress is, and most importantly, we can all stay safe. Please, board and administration, help us to go back to virtual learning until it's safe to return so that all of us can be back in the classroom. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so public comment is now closed. Would any board members like to provide comment on this particular agenda item? Nope. Jessica?
I just wanted to say that I'm, I know we're not making a decision this week, but I'm pleased that we can give them this raise. It's very well deserved. That's all.
Yeah, ditto, I would agree with you. If we have no other board comments, then I'd like to move on to item H2, school reopening update. Staff will review the progress on the return of students to campuses. Mr. Baer.
Yes, good evening. The board asked for an update on the reopening, and over the course of the weekend, there was some requests for additional data. So we've added to the original, including some information that Governor Newsom included late Friday. So you will see some extra info in here. So I want to open by saying I absolutely recognize this continues to be a supremely challenging year. It has required all of us to extend ourselves. I hear from our input from the teachers that it is stressful, especially as news swirls around us constantly, painting a picture that really can be terrifying. And I really think that at times like these, it's imperative that we step back and review our information, our local data. We have been at this for about 15 weeks that we have here in LASD, and reflect on our own circumstance. And then ask, does the data support our anxiety, or does the data support our schools and our safe places? I absolutely understand the stress. Yet I also want to make sure we're looking at this through the lens of our reality here. So Marcy, next slide. So recognizing students return to campus today, cohorts A and TK through grade 5, as well as our special day class students. Up next scheduled are grade 6, 7, and 8 on January 20th. Next slide. I really wanted to outline the principles we are working from as we operate this year. Health and safety of our students, our staff is our top priority. It's what we value the most. We spent the entire summer building a plan to serve all in our school district, paying very close attention to the requirements coming in from the national level, the state level, and here in Santa Clara County as well. So that idea of health and safety is really where we place the greatest value. It's our top priority. We also recognize that students and staff are at their best in person. So we set out a plan to get there, working collaboratively with our labor groups. Health experts have provided outstanding guidance to us that has proven successful this year. We are basing our decisions on that expertise, and we very strictly and very consistently adhere to that guidance from our public health experts and consult them regularly. And as I said previously, we have collaborated with our labor groups to negotiate these agreements and continue to adhere to them. Oftentimes going beyond the state and local health guidance with more stringent requirements. Next slide. So just a quick program update here. Our implementation of those health and safety guidelines from Santa Clara County Public Health Department and California Department of Public Health have been largely successful on our campuses. We have worked through glitches, but largely they have proven successful. And as a reminder, we did pause, it was mentioned in some of the comments, paused in-person learning the week prior to and the week after winter break due to some staffing challenges we were working through. Our concern that we might not have the staffing necessary to adhere to those protocols, those safety protocols that we have in place. So we have addressed those over the past weeks. You'll see on our personal action tonight, we have 10 employees that we have hired to bolster our work. And I just want to point out that we paused in-person learning, right? We called a pause on that because we refuse to place our staff and our students in a situation that we believe is unsafe, right? We do believe that if we follow all of the guidance from public health, that we can provide a safe environment. But when we can't, when we have doubt that we can, and we are not 100% sure that we can implement all of those mitigations, we will pause. Because we have added staffing and reorganized some staffing, any future pauses will be more localized, focusing on the classroom level or the program level. We realize also that this stop and start is very challenging for people, right? It's challenging for our staff who have to retool in a short period of time, and it's challenging for our parents who have to sometimes scramble to switch programs. Overall, I think it's important to recognize that our overarching goal, while we have invested so much time, energy, and effort, and why we are working diligently, is our goal of sustaining in-person instruction in the long term. So next slide. You've seen this slide before. I just want to give a little bit of color to it. We have invested, I worked with Randy in doing a tabulation. We have invested about $2.5 million in the health and safety protocols to bring students back in person and ensure we have a safe environment for staff and students. This is equipment, this is staffing, that we have spent money on to make sure we can successfully navigate these protocols. And these are, I want to point out, there's a matrix of protocols. No one protocol, be it face covering, be it distancing, be it hand hygiene, no one protocol is going to suffice. It is through the use of all of these together that we are able to mitigate the spread within our schools. Santa Clara County Public Health Department put these guidelines in place really because the assumption is in our county and our community that there are positive cases. So we have now implemented a plan allowing us to mitigate the spread even if a positive case is on campus. And we have had positive cases on campus. But what we have discovered is when all of these are implemented and adhered to, the practices work. But I just think it's really important to understand that the assumption when we wear a mask, when I wear a mask and go to the grocery store or come to work or whatever it is, that is because I am assuming that I am going to interact with a positive case, right? And it also assumes that I'm positive as well. It's what we do to protect one another. And again, we know it's effective. That has been our experience. We know this pandemic can provoke anxiety, yet all these measures directed by health experts have allowed us and allow us to continue to engage in these essential services like going to the doctor's office, getting groceries, spending time outside, and schools. Schools are able to provide the most restrictive environment possible, right? We get to require that all of these protocols are adhered to, and we have alternatives for those children or those families who can't adhere to them. The exception of our most severe special education students, we're proving very successful in adhering to all of these, and they must be followed. It's just the way it is in school. Next slide. Again, our schools are safe places to teach and learn. We've been open since September 28. Again, strict adherence to state, local, and our own health guidelines. We know mitigation protocols and procedures have been effective, and it's critical that they're all followed. We have constant communication with families and staff about public health guideline changes, reminders, remembering to follow all the notifications and procedures. We have follow-up calls that we do to parents when we understand there has been a breach of some sort. And then also the completion of the COVID-19 tracker. That's an expectation. That is one of those mitigations that work in concert with all of the others. So we're following up on that. And we really are relying on, I've heard it mentioned a couple of times already, we are relying on this partnership with families and staff because we know it's essential to our success. Next slide. So the questions asked about remaining open in the purple tier. There's what seems to be conflicting information. I think it's really important to recognize that we are adhering and operating under these guidelines for schools. Santa Clara County Public Health and California Department of Public Health have both said schools should stay open and can operate safely in purple and also under the regional stay-at-home order. We have demonstrated the effective implementation of these health and safety protocols, and our feedback from Santa Clara County public health officials has been very positive, right? Impressed with the plan we have in place and the demonstration of its effectiveness. We do have mechanisms for closing, and that has to do with the number of cases on campus. If we have 5% positive cases in a 14-day period on a school campus, that would require a consult with Santa Clara County Public Health. As a district, if 25% of our campuses close within a 14-day period because of the bullet above, then that requires a consult with Santa Clara County Public Health about a school closure. We are regularly consulting with experts at Santa Clara County Public Health and with California Department of Public Health to update procedures based on changes in guidance. And we do, as you know, I believe, we have a district reopening plan and a site-based reopening plans based on this state and local guidance that have been approved by the Board of Trustees. Next slide. Thought it would be good to look at the numbers we have experienced thus far, right? So on the left, you see each of the schools. In that next column, that's going to be the total number of students and staff on campus during a typical week. That's going to be after January 20th, when we have students back from grades 6, 7, and 8. So that, and again, it's important that adults and students are included because that is what is being monitored by the Public Health Department. So based on those numbers, hitting the threshold at each of those campuses is listed in the third column. For instance, Almond would have, if they have 15 positive cases within a 14-day period, that would hit the 5% threshold. And you can look down and see each of our schools and what the thresholds would be. In the column on the far right, this is the information that's actually publicly available on our district website, which shows the actual number of COVID positive cases to date, both students and staff, for the 15 weeks we have been in person, right? So you can see 3 is the highest number of cases at any one site. What's not on here, we have two at the district office level that weren't listed just because I'm not listing, I'm only listing school sites here. Our numbers are steady. They're small and they're steady. No matter where we come from in the county, we all arrive here on campus, right? I know our teachers, I heard people talk about living up in Emily talked about living up in San Francisco, and I know Gina talked about her family or children going to school in Burlingame. We know we're coming from different places within the county. The data reflects that as well, right? That's a part of the data. It's there regardless of where people are actually coming from. So next slide. So a bit about these sets of data. So we've had a total of 17 cases at LASD schools. As I said, we have a total of 19. 2 of them were at the district office level. Since our return to in-person learning back on September 28th. Some of those cases are within the same family. 2 siblings, both testing positive. A total of 5 cohorts have been moved to quarantine since September 28th, based on those positive tests, right? A positive test doesn't always send a cohort into quarantine, right? That doesn't always happen. There may not have been close contact. It may have been a staff member who doesn't have contact necessarily with a cohort as well. Our district nurses, Monica Sidher and Mary Fitzgerald, do a tremendous job of contact tracing once we hear of a positive case. So we really are relentless in following up on that and making sure that we are very conservative and in identifying who those possible close contacts are. So our weekly average of COVID cases in the district is just a little over 1 per week. Last week, most recent week, we had a total of 2 identified cases in the district. Just for your information as well, in case you don't know, that table is updated each Sunday for the prior week, because sometimes we get reports of cases that come in on Saturday that are attributed to the previous week. So again, there's ongoing tracking of cases. We are not out of line as I look at other districts who are open in the area. Menlo Park, Palo Alto, Hillsborough, we're not out of line with the number of cases that are being seen. In fact, we're generally a bit lower. So this really goes to say that our model of stable cohorts, wearing masks, maintaining distance, ensuring ventilation has proven essential and effective in mitigating spread on our campuses and our classrooms. Next slide. So a little bit about Governor Newsom's recent release. He has released his Safe Schools for All plan. Under this plan, districts would be provided an additional $450 per student to assist with reopening and health and safety implementation. This is even for districts that have already opened, like LASD. There are many strings attached and hurdles to overcome to receive this funding. With the work we have done and what we have implemented already, we are in a strong position to qualify should this happen. I'll point out that COVID case levels within a county, as referenced in this plan, are for reopening apply only to districts that are not yet open. And the rationale behind this, as I've said before, is districts that are open and operating safely should remain open in their eyes. We have demonstrated that effectiveness, and metrics are already in place for closures at those school sites. The future of this is really unclear. There are already, there's already people sniping at it and picking it apart. So whether it happens, we're not quite, whether it's going to come to fruition, we're not quite sure. But there are other legislative actions pushing a more aggressive plan than this one to open schools. So there are a number of legislators moving in the same direction with this. Next slide. So the public health guidelines on quarantining, I'm gonna have Monica talk just a little bit about this. She is, she and Mary have really become expert in this. So I'm gonna let her speak to it. Monica?
Thank you, Jeff. So public health guidelines on quarantining, we have been following what has been put forth for quarantine and isolation guidelines. So as Jeff mentioned, as soon as we hear of any potential exposure or possible, may have been exposed to so-and-so, Mary or I follow up with that family immediately to gather details about that case. We initiate a 10-day quarantine if you are a close contact to somebody, a 10-day isolation if you are a positive case. And then based on that, we do contact tracing on a school level and quarantine those individuals accordingly. So whether it be a classroom setting or whether it be other staff members. In addition to that, we have also, there is an order from the county and state level to quarantine if you have traveled more than 120 miles from your place of residence outside of the county. And so we are following up with each of those families who have potentially traveled, and we've heard they've traveled, and asking them to complete that 10-day quarantine before they return to school.
Thank you, Monica. I think one of the things to remember in our in-person model is that disruption is always possible, right? And that is one of the challenges with this, for sure. I mentioned earlier, but I'll just repeat, with the idea of localizing future pauses, should there need to be any, we have hired additional staff. We have done some reorganization of personnel. And we as we anticipate the possibility of pauses happening in future, we are really looking for those to occur in a more targeted fashion. Next slide. We have the plan of returning 6th, 7th, and 8th grades next week, January 20th. We have consulted with Santa Clara County Public Health on all planning, operations, protocols for student and staff safety. The plan was approved and go-ahead issued. We have also consulted with other school districts, specifically with middle school currently in person. I'm going to have Keith Roaches here, and I'm going to ask Keith to talk about both interactions with Menlo Park and with Hillsborough that have taken place.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit more about Menlo Park, more so than Hillsborough, I think, just because we had some real close FaceTime with Menlo Park recently. So as many of you know, that part of our reopening task force talked about doing some outreach among the other districts that are currently open. And so we organized some in-person time with Menlo Park City School District, and we went over to Hillview Middle School. And, you know, they were just amazing, so outstanding and gracious in hosting our small team from Los Altos. And so Principal Narula from Block, Miss Connie Collmore from Egan, Allison Musich also from Egan, Jason Dewberry from Block, Pat Korn from Block, Megan Greenbaum from Block, and then our two awesome district nurses, Monica and Mary, took the opportunity and walked around Hillview Middle School. One thing to note is we were greeted really kindly by the principal. The school, if you don't know too much about Hillview Middle School, it's approximately 900 students regularly. And I think in this current circumstance, about 20% selected the virtual option. So at any point in time, there's approximately 300 students on campus. Their model is a cohort model where students move from class to class. They operate essentially from 8:30 to 2:30 regularly, with both brunch and lunch occurring throughout the day, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. And they've been open since October and have not had to close the school down for any cases. You know, as we walked in, we noticed signage as you entered the buildings, as you enter the campus, walkways that show students where to go, the flow of campus. We asked what precautions are taken before students come to campus, and parents and students use an app, a health screener, to identify how they're feeling before they come to school. When they get to school, they do a temperature check before students go onto campus, and then the students go directly to the classroom. So it was really interesting to see how they've incorporated those, the screeners, how they've incorporated the 6-foot distancing rules, the mask wearing, and how students were able to follow those processes and procedures while on campus. We got to see the flow of students onto campus. We got to see them flow from class to class. We got to see students in action in the classroom with teachers. Again, still maintaining all of that physical distancing with the masks. Some teachers who were less comfortable being on campus did have some of the screens at each desk, but not all classes had that. And while we were observing the classrooms, teachers, we did see them also wipe down all the student desks and chairs and those screens if they had them in class, to follow ththose protocols and processes and make sure everything was safe. So students were out, 6-foot distance, they had snack time. And, you know, I think the best part of this visit was to get to talk with some of those students and the teachers themselves, where the kids were just so thrilled to just be back. And as a principal, it was really nice to hear the kids, just their laughter, and just to have the conversation with them. So that was very nice. A lot of our team members really found that valuable. And then, you know, we got to see all of these protocols, all the procedures, and see some of the instruction. And then at the end, we got to talk to two of the teachers that talked about what it was like for them to transition. And there was some anxiety before they transitioned back And one of them was more conservative than the other teacher, but they talked about the process that they went through. They talked about the protocols that they established, the conversations that they had, and what they did individually in each of their classes to feel comfortable to provide that solid instruction in the classroom. And at the end of the day, they were really happy that they went back, and they were just glad to be with kids. One of them commented that she feels like the smaller groups, because they do have cohorts as well, and it's approximately, I think, 12 to 13 students in each of the cohorts. She just found that small community was really nice to help, to continue to build that community and foster those relationships with the kids. So it was a successful tour, very gracious, very kind of them to offer an opportunity for outsiders to come onto the campus and to see the flow and see how kids are interacting. And we asked a couple questions around how do you help students with the masks, if they're not listening, what do you do? And they said, we remind the students to wear the mask, and most of our students are wearing the masks and do what they need to do. And if a student's running up because they're late, they're not sure, and their mask is somewhere, it falls on the ground, a lot of the staff members have a little extra paper mask in their pockets that they'll just give to the students as they make their way to class. But it was nice. And then in relation to Hillsborough, we had a really nice conversation with the principal and assistant principal around what they've done. And it is also very similar, where they're using a cohort model where students are moving from class to class most of the day, eating brunch, eating lunch, and maneuvering about the campus. And again, those students they've all been successful. It's going well for them. In Menlo Park, they started in October. And in Hillsborough, I believe it was in December, more recent, that they opened to their middle school students. So overall, the program that they put in place seems to be working out well. The protocols, processes, procedures, directional arrows from movement of traffic, and all those things seem to be working well. And we were encouraged, the team, after we left, it was nice to just see things in action and feel that the plan that we've created, while a little bit different than the other two communities, it could work well, will work well for our students and staff. And so we felt pretty confident about that.
Thanks, Keith.
Sure.
And then just to follow up on this last one, I have been in consultation with Scott Riches, the head of Pinewood School, about their return. And similar to what Keith described, the mitigation measures that are in place are very similar. I think that what we are doing and what each of these schools are doing, they are following the health orders, right? And those are very similar at each of the schools. So, and all right, so next slide. Sandra, you want to talk a little bit about LASD Plus?
Yep, just wanted to remind the board that we do have our LASD Plus program up and running at all of our schools. I know I was at Almond School today. This is our group of students who have been struggling the most through distance learning and who really require that on-site support to access their learning. So today, during my time at Almond, we quickly realized that not all of the students we were expecting to be in our LASD Plus program showed up. I wouldn't be surprised if that was true across our schools. So we spent the morning just calling families and reminding them of the program and its availability, and that we expect students to be on campus. And this is really a critical function. While we know distance learning and pandemic learning is challenging for all students, we certainly know that the students participating in our LASD Plus program are ones we're keeping an extra watch on to make sure that they are both accessing their learning and really making the growth that they need in order to grow as learners. So we're happy to be providing that service and want to make sure that our students are showing up when we expect them. Next slide, Marcy.
Next slide, Marcy. And then, as Ricky mentioned, we have received a letter from Los Altos Teachers Association expressing concern, and it's important that it's understood that we know and acknowledge, understand and acknowledge the concerns being expressed by our teachers. They're real. We do hear them. Our commitment has always been and will continue to be to provide the very safe work environment possible. And I'm confident in our school district's ability to remain open as we are seeing no surge in cases in LASD. The network of mitigation measures in place and guidance are provided by health experts are proving effective. And we continue to be available to collaboratively work through specific concerns, situations, and requests. I understand teachers are concerned about, as expressed in the letter, the high rate of new cases in the county, the ICU bed availability, the stress and mental health of teachers. That is a key concern, and overall campus health and safety. As Ricky indicated, there's a request for to remain in distance learning and to pause in-person learning until a vaccine is administered to all teachers, or we are in the red tier for 2 weeks. I think we're looking at the estimate of when vaccine is going to be available is a bit murky right now in Santa Clara County. I hope to hear more tomorrow. I think if we think about just understanding what the regimen is important. I think recognizing that there are 2 inoculations required in order for that to occur is also important. There are currently negotiated agreements in place with LATA, and as Ricky said, it sounds like there's a want to revisit those agreements. So with that, I think that's the last one. Next slide. Yeah, just a reminder of the principles under which we are operating and under which we are doing all of this work, right? Health and safety of our students and staff is what we value most. We know that the best instructional model for students is in person. We are ensuring that science guide our decisions, especially in these anxiety-ridden times. Turning to the experts is important. We're strictly, consistently adhering to our health experts' guidance. And again, we collaborate and will continue to collaborate with our labor groups. So with that, Shali, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. At this point, do any of the board members have any clarifying questions on Jeff's presentation? Vladimir.
Yes, thank you, Shali. Jeff, if you go back to the LASD COVID by the numbers on one of the slides there, how many of those COVIDs were student to staff transmissions, as far as you can tell? Do you know that, or you not know that?
I don't know that.
Okay, all right.
Any other clarifying questions? Okay. So if you have public comment, please start raising your hand on Zoom. And while you all are doing that, I just wanted to say, before I open up for public comment, the board needs to balance competing legal rights related to this discussion. On the one hand, we respect the right of individuals to address the board on agenda items, but this is not a dialogue between the public and the board or a town hall kind of meeting. On the other hand, since the subject matter at hand concerns negotiable subjects and is in fact already covered in large part in an existing negotiated agreement, the public discussion of this matter will avoid violating our bargaining law by negotiating in public. Since this does concern negotiable matters, the board will be adjourning to closed session after this open session to receive input from and give direction to our negotiations team. And I just want to say, please know that we have read every email that we've received, including the letter from LATA. And if, looks like we have 14 hands up. Okay, and if someone else has already said or made a point that you want to make, you may consider just saying ditto or giving your time to someone else. All right, and now I shall read this. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raised hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Looks like we have quite a few hands up, so each speaker will be given 2 minutes. If you don't get a chance to say everything you want to say, please email us. Okay, Marcy, I am ready for you to start calling people.
Our first speaker is Jim Yang.
Hi there. So I guess I wanted to speak, as you heard earlier, my wife Nancy spoke. She's a teacher at high school outside the school district. We have 2 kids, 2 boys that attend Loyola in 3rd and 5th grade. One thing I wanted to, I believe, ask or point out, I guess, about the table is, I believe that table represented 1 week of in-person attendance for 5th graders and 4 weeks for 3rd and 4th graders. So I think it may be reasonable to assume that the number will go up as more kids are on campus. But I'm really wanted to talk from the perspective of the spouse of a teacher. I'm happy to hear that teachers are being recognized as essential workers. But I wanted to remind the board and also even the parents that when a decision is made to send teachers back to the school, you're sending spouses and spending kids and increasing the exposure for us. If my wife catches COVID from one of her students, it stands to reason that my sons and I will now be at risk as well. From a more practical perspective, I do worry, one of the reasons my wife and I selected Los Altos is the quality of education. The teachers, the staff are the best. And one, I think from some of the earlier comments, you can hear the anxiety and stress and emotion from a lot of the teachers. And one thing that I worry about is if we make this decision to go back to in-person learning, I wonder about the school district's ability to hire and retain the talent. Because I think everybody would recognize that while we love the campus settings and the playgrounds and everything, the thing that makes our school so wonderful are the teachers and staff. And so I worry that if we go back to school, it's already challenging for teachers to work and live in an expensive area like this. And I worry that going back to school in person is not going to help that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ann Spector.
Good evening. I am a national board certified teacher, and I have been a proud Egan teacher since 1999. I have always strived to do what's best for students. I do not believe it is safe to return students to our junior high schools next week due to the current health crisis and surge. Nearly 90% of Egan teachers agree. Even with the health and safety protocols, being indoors with over 100 students each week feels reckless. I'm frightened for myself and my colleagues, for our households, and for the Egan families. We don't know much about COVID, yet what we do know has led to shelter in place and shutdown orders to keep people away from each other. It is critical that we each do our part to stop the spread. 100 breathing beings is a lot, and each of these students also interacts with more people outside of their classroom cohorts. They've been seen in Los Altos neighborhoods without masks and physically close to their friends. They have shared in my online classes that their families have traveled to other states, that they've visited numerous extended family members, and that they've had sleepovers with friends. There have been positive cases and serious illness in our LASD community. Public health guidelines are not being followed by everyone, and I am not confident that that behavior will change next week. Without mandated regular testing for everyone, the risk is huge. The subject I teach is music, but what I really teach is people. I teach students to work hard and persevere, to be respectful and kind, to care for and collaborate with others, and to make a beautiful world. I teach them to be moral humans and to make wise decisions so that they can lead happy and fulfilling lives. I've always been able to teach in a genuine way, as this aligns with my own values. But I will find it very difficult to be an effective teacher in an environment where I do not feel safe or cared for. Please consider LATA's request for a pause to in-person learning so that we can maintain our excellent education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carrie Berzelius.
So I'm a teacher at Egan Junior High as well, 8th grade, and I'm also a parent in the district. Like so many of our teachers, we care deeply for our students, and we do want to see them and come back in person with them. However, there is, like how so many of my colleagues have expressed, at being a junior high level, the numbers of students that we will be in the rooms with and being in contact with on a weekly basis is unnerving. There are numerous safety measures, and the work that has been done and the cooperative work that has been done does help. But in the time that we're currently in, it just is unnerving. I've been in the district for 6 years, and I have witnessed such strong and supportive support from our community, from our families, our board members, our admin, and just among teachers. But this has been hard. And it's not often that we teachers even come to you to ask for anything. I will tell you, there is stress in coming to ask you for a pause, to ask you for just a little more time so that maybe things get under control. We're asking simply for a delay, not forever, just a little more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Our next speaker is Lorena Roland.
Hi, thank you so much for having this discussion tonight. While I wholeheartedly respect both sides that have been presented here, I feel we should look at the data presented by Mr. Baer of the students who have returned to school, perhaps separating the elementary versus the junior high school, and whether this has in fact caused an increase in COVID infections amongst teachers. We are arguably at risk in our everyday activities, but our students are now suffering academically, but most importantly, psychologically. Physicians risk their lives, their entire careers. I'm not suggesting that teachers risk their lives, but going to school in Los Altos, masked and with the precautions that we are taking and that we now know work well, I would argue that this is not considered life risking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michelle Belak.
Hi, thank you very much. I appreciate so much of the effort that's gone into figuring out the plan. I'm sure when you signed up for being on a board or even being a teacher that none of this was predictable. And I just appreciate what has to go into this. I have 2 kids at Online Owls now. We've chosen to go virtual. Their home school is Springer. And I've seen the disruption that's happening as parents want to switch and more people are coming to virtual school, and us being short-staffed for a while at virtual school. I wanted to just say that I agree with what the teachers are asking for. We're in the purple tier. At least some sort of stabilization and vaccinations available, I think is critical to keep them safe. And I did want to just propose that the board members go and sit in the classrooms with the teachers and understand, I guess, what it would be like
being there every day and going for maybe a full week into different classrooms and understanding what it's like to try to answer questions, staying at 6 feet with a mask, or all the wiping down that they have to do, and just the anxiety of being in that classroom. So I would propose that if they decide to stay open. My preference is not to stay open, except for the cases where students absolutely must be at school for in-person learning due to learning difficulties, or essential workers and healthcare frontline workers that need to have a place for their children while they're also doing the difficult job of having to go to work. For those of us in the tech industry or desk jobs, it is hard being home with the kids and the disruptions, but that's just what we're all going through right now. And if you can stay home, please stay home. Stay home now so we aren't missing anybody later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emma Dorn.
Is it Emma or Sharon?
Oh,
Emma. Okay.
Hi. So I am the mom of 3 kids in Los Altos schools, but my job since March has been working with school systems and districts around the world on their response to COVID-19, working with UNESCO, working with several state and district superintendents. And so I wanted to share a little bit of the global and US scientific evidence on school reopening. I also want to acknowledge, I know we're in a very worrying time, but it's important to note that there are real costs and risks of not having in-person instruction too. In fact, our analysis suggests that students lost about 1.5 months of reading learning and 3 months of math learning just from the shutdowns in the spring. So just very quickly on some of the evidence, children tend to be less prone to infection and less likely to transmit COVID. So the real question is around risk to teachers in the community, which is an important question. The good news is, as most high income countries have returned to in-person instruction in the fall, we now have a wealth of scientific studies casting some light on that question. I have 58 seconds, so I can't go through even like 1 or 2 of them. I'm really happy to spend an hour with the board going through all the evidence. But a couple of examples, a recent study in Northern Carolina looked at 100,000 staff and students in 11 districts that were in person for 9 weeks in the fall. Of those, over those 9 weeks, 773 acquired COVID-19 in the community. And so this is a really important distinction. So those people acquired it not at school, but from family members, outside gatherings, etc. Just 32 acquired COVID-19 at school. So that was a 0.32% chance of catching COVID at school. So the risk of being in the community is much greater than the risk of being in school. And in fact, many of the superintendents we talk with around the country say school is actually the safest place to be. If we do need to scale back, I'd recommend probably delaying opening of middle school versus closing K-12. Elementary tends to be safer. And also making the trigger point for reopening being the Harvard School of Public Health metric of 25 daily cases, rather than being under 7 daily cases or waiting for everyone to be vaccinated. Sorry, I went a little over, but happy to talk more later.
Thank you, Emma. And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't get a chance to say everything you wanted to say, please email the board.
Our next speaker is Sharon Warner.
Hello, I'd like to first thank the board and the LASD community for their efforts to maintain education since the pandemic started in March. Teachers and staff made tremendous adjustments after the experience from March to June, with the result that this year's educational approach has been largely successful for many students and families. There are definitely some families and students, however, who've had very poor experience with distance learning for a variety of reasons. I applaud the district for establishing the LASD Plus programs for such students and families, and I'm in awe of my colleagues in the administration who are willing and able to be on campus for these students. I truly believe that an in-person or on-site experience is the best teaching method for the vast majority of students and families when such an activity can be safely experienced. Our community is facing a steep rise in the number of COVID cases, and the state-mandated stay-at-home orders have been extended indefinitely due to the skyrocketing number of cases. The current plan requires middle school staff to rotate among 4 different cohort groups, which is equivalent to 8 pods, since the Monday-Thursday group differs from the Thursday-Friday group. I had made the painful choice I would not return to teaching the block if I had to be on site. I'm happy that I'm able to stay as a virtual teacher in middle school math since I'm quite concerned about my possible risk of exposure to COVID-19. And I don't see how the data supports a safe return of the majority of students and staff. Although I will stay virtual, I'm nonetheless concerned about my peers who may also be uncomfortable or fearful of teaching on site, yet must do so to maintain their paycheck. As an important additional point, the current reopening plan does mean a decrease in teaching time for middle school students. In our current distance learning model, the middle school teachers see their students for 160 minutes with an additional 50 minutes built into the schedule for afternoon Google Meets. The upcoming blended hybrid model means middle school teachers will see students for only 150 minutes per week. Although I want you to be aware of the decrease in instructional time, my main message is to encourage the board to relook and delay reopening of the middle schools on 20 January to help keep the community safe and until we're in a safer tier and vaccination is proceeded. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Beth Rubenstein.
Hi, I'm Becca Rubenstein from Loyola. I teach fifth grade. The children in the Los Altos School District are our top priority. As teachers, we tend to put others before ourselves. So it would make sense that we always want what's best for our students. But we're living in a pandemic now that kills people. I care for my students as if they were my very own. Academics are secondary in my classroom. Safety is number one. That's been my motto throughout my teaching career in my classroom. When I'm in person teaching now, I feel that since the children are on my watch, I worry even more every moment they're at school under my care. The stress is overwhelming. It's constant. We teachers need to consider our own risks during these challenging times too. Some of these include district families and staff traveling without quarantining, and many of our staff members live outside of the district where safety bubbles vary. I stay at home. In fact, my family cares about me staying alive since I'm immunocompromised with lupus. Therefore, I'm more vulnerable to contracting COVID. I've not been able to travel to see my own daughter for almost a year now, or my parents for that matter, since they don't live locally. However, I'm expected to go into work now to teach live while we are in the purple tier to those outside my family. This is all at a time when online instruction in our district is the safest option and probably the best quality in the state. In 30 years of teaching, I've never taken any long-term leave, not even when I gave birth to my children. This is the first time I've ever considered it. Clearly, I do not prefer this option, and I would not have to think long and hard about it if the district permits us to stay in distance learning. The stress has been unbearable, and it's impossible to think straight when juggling 3 jobs at a time, teaching online, teaching in person, and COVID monitoring in the classroom. So much has never been asked of me in 30 years, and it's downright challenging. Please consider, seriously consider, keeping us all remote until we're vaccinated. We can give our students a top-notch education, and we'll be able to return when it's safe for all of us. We cannot bring those we care about back to life once they're gone forever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris Hazelton.
Hello there. This is Chris Hazelton, and I teach 6th grade at Covington. And I'm also here with my husband, Brian Conti, who teaches 3rd grade at Springer. And, one of the things we are concerned about is something that I spoke with Mr. Bear about last week, and it's the issue of trust. And I think that for a lot of teachers, we feel anxious because we hear stories about families traveling or gathering or students hanging out unmasked. And there have even been times in my own classes where I've seen students sitting unmasked with each other in a room. And so that does give me pause, because I think that a big part of this process is how we trust each other as a community. And I appreciate the parents like Mrs. Sood, who spoke earlier, who talked about how seriously she's taking this and how safe she keeps her family. And I think that that will help a lot to allay some of the anxiety we feel as we're being asked to head back into the classroom. And I'll let my husband go now.
Hi, as my husband said, my name's Brian Conti. I teach 3rd grade at Springer. And I think I speak for many of us as teachers when we say there is no place else we would rather be besides in the classroom with our students. But when we look at a situation where we essentially have no ICU beds left in our county, if even 1 or 2 people get COVID to the point where they need hospitalization, there's a very good chance that they won't get the life-saving care that they would need. And so it's with that we urge the board and the school district to consider allowing teachers to remain virtual until we've either been vaccinated or until the county has been in the red for 2 weeks. Thank you.
Great, thank you both.
Our next speaker is Anju Vriksha Joseph.
Hello, my name is Anju Vriksha. I am an 6th grade teacher at Almond Elementary. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share from my experience. I would like to say ditto to all the teachers who've gone before me and expressed our love and passion for teaching. There is no one in my life who understands my calling as a teacher more than my mother. She's also a public school teacher. She works at Prospect High School. My mother is 65 years old, diabetic, and she has a very rare autoimmune disorder. And due to some challenging life situations, I've had to move in with my mom, and she graciously offered me to share with her in her bedroom and even made a workspace for me to teach from her small condo. If I get COVID-19 or if I get infected, I'm risking the life of my mother. We are not in a place where I have a space. Literally, there is no physical space for me to isolate or to keep her safe. In our household, the safety is priority. We go over and beyond in terms of cleanliness and hygiene to keep ourselves safe. My mom has not left her house since March, and that's what her doctors advise. And I'm going to ask you to think about people like me who can't afford to lose our jobs. My only option is to take a leave of absence or to give up on my job altogether or risk my mom's life. That's being stuck in between a rock and a hard place. It is a tough choice to make, but yet I make that choice out of my love for teaching and my love for students. I ask that we delay so that we can choose the safety of people we love. I ask the board to consider our humble request. There's more I want to say, but our time is short. Thank you so much for listening to me and other teachers and taking us into consideration. And please, I urge you to pause, delay, and reconsider bringing us back in person.
Thank you, Anju.
Our next speaker is Lorena Roland.
Thank you. And I want to first thank my principal and the board for working diligently to put safety procedures in place. And I do appreciate that you've made many efforts. And the parents are sincere in their efforts to protect the teachers. However, I have to tell you that after 21 years in F block, I got a little older. I like to say mature. And like many of the mature teachers, I'm a little frail, and I am very, very afraid with the in-person teaching of many students that there would not have to be very many cases for it to be me and for it to be fatal. So I will ask you for your consideration to please consider waiting until the numbers are down a little bit, or maybe until we can get a vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena.
Our next speaker is Pam Loebner.
Pam, it looks like you need to unmute.
won't let me oh, okay, I'm so sorry. It would not unmute. Was being a little bit problematic. So good evening. My name is Pam Loebner and I teach kindergarten at Gardner Bullis School. I'm speaking to you this evening as an LATA representative on behalf of many of my elementary colleagues here at LASD. There is no question that teachers and students would prefer to be in the classroom. Teachers here at LASD feel as strongly as each of you do that our students deserve a high quality education. We are working hard to provide that to all of our students. But I want to share a concern I have regarding teaching face-to-face with students. My concern is in regards to the inequity we have at multiple sites and grade levels of cohort size. It's fine for me to say that I am not uncomfortable teaching in person. My cohorts are small and I can safely distance from the students. It also helps that TK1 students are smaller than other grades and can be spaced more easily. But there are cohorts of 14 and 15 that, due to smaller classroom size and a larger physical presence, cannot be safely distanced. Even with minimal furniture, it is very challenging to space out desks for the students and remain vigilant at maintaining a 6-foot distance. This is stressful for those teachers impacted by those larger cohorts. I have great appreciation for the fact that the district is following the county guidelines, and right now they're working in my room. And if you ask my principal, she would agree that I am much happier to be back in my classroom with my students. But if my cohort sizes were larger and I did not have adequate space to safely socially distance, I too would be anxious about being in class with students due to our return to the purple tier. This is where the inequity comes in and why I support the feelings of our LATA membership. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brett Linville.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brett, and I'm a 6th grade teacher at Almond. I would just like to echo the concerns of my colleagues, just with our concerns to reopen 6th to 8th grades to in-person instruction next week. We know that middle-aged students or middle school age students have a higher chance of getting ill from COVID. And although the district has taken steps to mitigate the spread of COVID on campus, the current surge in cases is not the time to test these mitigation strategies. What unsettles me most is that we have no way of knowing if our students are coming into our classroom with COVID-19. Besides a symptom tracker and recommendations for a healthy community, we really don't know the spread of COVID in our schools. It is reasonable to assume that the spread is at its worst now in Los Altos and the surrounding communities where many teachers and staff come from. Only a mandatory testing regime for both students and staff would show how prevalent COVID is in our school community. And now, when ICU beds are less than 10% available in Santa Clara County, is not the time to reopen our schools to even more students. Over the past week, LATA has clearly shown that a majority of our teachers do not feel comfortable working in person at this time. As the only emotional support that lives within driving distance of my parents, who are 65 and 70 years old, I will not take the chance of seeing them in person if we return to school. This saddens me and them, but I know of other LASD staff that live with parents and others in high-risk groups. To put it simply, we don't want our decision to come to work one morning to put our families in danger. Thank you for listening to our request to remain in remote instruction until we return to the red tier for 2 consecutive weeks, or until all teachers have completed their course of vaccination. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brett. Before we go on to the next speaker, I just want to say that if you want to speak, please raise your hand now. It looks like Malik Takal for now is the last person. So I'm going to close it. So raise your hands now to get in line. All right. All right. Thank you. Okay, it looks like Stephanie Elephant might be the last person. Okay, sorry, Marcy, you can continue calling names.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Lee.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Lee. Thank you so much for everybody who's attending this meeting. I am an
nurse practitioner at Stanford. I've been there for 26 years. My husband's also a physician, and I am a proud Loyola and Block parent. I have a current kinder, an 8th grader, and a college kid. And yes, you should all feel very sorry for me. While I appreciate all the data that was presented earlier by Mr. Baer, I want to give you a little bit of an inside scoop of what I experienced at Stanford. I luckily work in the outpatient clinic, so I am not at the bedside of patients who are actively COVID sick, on ventilators and all that. However, as of last week, we have been assigned an emergency deployment to go back to the bedside because so many inpatient nurses and doctors are sick. My husband's also being asked to, as a neurosurgeon, work at the bedside to be a ventilator ICU doctor. It is not ideal. That is what's happening in the sick world of being a first responder in the hospital. What disturbs me is I've also, in taking care of my patients, have talked to many public health officials, and they're telling me that there's a 30% false negative rate for some of these testings. And these are the testings that are the Q-tip up the nose testings. That is concerning. So a lot of the negative rates that are being reported, I'm worried, are 30% wrong. I do think, and knowing that I have 30 seconds left, I do think that although I love to have my kids in school as much as the next person, I think it is safe to wait 2 weeks to be in the red tier, or for these people to be vaccinated. I personally vaccinated 400 people over the past 2 weeks. I'm happy to vaccinate all of LASD, along with all the other nurses and doctors out there who are parents, in order to protect our teachers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joseph Field.
Hello, this is Joseph Field. I think I'm on. So I'm a dentist here in Los Altos and have 4 kids in the school district, 8th grade, 6th, and 1st grade. Twins, and I just got to applaud the teachers and the administration, what they've done thus far. My twins in 1st grade have been back 2 days a week. It's been fantastic to see the efforts being made. I'm not going to speak to the data. I think it speaks for itself. I will share personal experiences with my work. I think it's relevant. So we're in the war zone in the mouth. We deal with infectious diseases that are transmitted by airborne particles, have my whole career. This is a nasty disease, there's no question. But I think with what we're trying to mitigate as far as dealing with our kids and their education, I think fear is not something that should be driving these decisions. I think it needs to be based on science and data. The reality of it is we had to deal with this in my dental practice. We were closed for 2 months back in March. When we came back in May, I have 36 employees. They were all very scared to come back, but we just sat down and talked about the data, implemented our protocols, many of which are being implemented by the school itself. And the reality of it is we are safe. We've been safe. We've been back in full force since May. We've had 0 issues of transmissions, and we are creating aerosolized particles in every procedure that we do in my office. So I understand the fear of the teachers. I know it's scary. We went through it with my staff. I have an immunocompromised daughter. It's part of our lives that we live today in this 2020, 2021 reality. The fact of the matter is, it comes down to, and I don't want to say this to be disrespectful, but it's ripping the Band-Aid off and realizing that we can protect ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laura Herman.
Hello, I am a parent of a 1st grader at Loyola Elementary, and this is her 3rd year at Loyola. During her time there, she has been expertly taught by the TK kindergarten and 1st grade teams, and every day she learns to be safe, responsible, and respectful. And I'm amazed at how her teachers have pivoted to teach her. And last year, my 8th grade daughter at Block, and to hear so many of the teachers who my children have had and love, and have contributed so much to their well-being, not just academically, but especially in this time when kids need to be supported in even more ways. I hope that as a district that we can be safe, responsible, and respectful. And as our principal always says, kind, and really listen and negotiate and care for our teachers in the ways that they've asked to be cared for. That we would listen to them and their concerns. And as a parent, I fully support our teachers. They've given so much to our family.
Thank you, Laura.
Our next speaker is Alyssa Ferris.
Hello, this is actually Dr. Ashna Karana. So I'm with Alyssa listening to this meeting on 2 different computers. But so I have 3 children in the Los Altos School District. I'm also a practicing inpatient pediatric hospitalist at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. So I've been taking care of active COVID positive patients since March. And, you know, I understand there's a lot of fear. I understand everyone's scared. It's a scary disease. It's a scary virus. But I can't emphasize enough how important it is to really, really look at the science and the data and what the transmission of children are and what the risk of being in school are. If you really look at all the studies, and there's lots, they're international, they're from the East Coast, they're everywhere. We have lots of really good data now, 10 months into this pandemic, that it is very safe to be in school if certain protocols are in place. And I really applaud LASD for putting together a fantastic safety protocol. I have gone and read through the entire 30-page document. It's very much in line with whatever the CDC is saying. It is much in line with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I want all of you to just take a moment and really realize the CDC months ago had said the first thing that should open our schools, the last thing that should close our schools. The AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they just 2 days ago reissued yet another statement imploring everyone to safely open schools. And LASD has done that. They have done a tremendous job. So I know everyone is scared, but I can tell you, I've looked at their protocols. LASD has got it down and they are doing the right thing. I've been working in the hospital with active COVID patients, and it's fine as long as you're using the right protocols and people are staying safe. So really, I implore you, the goal is to get, I know everyone wants to get the kids back and we want the teachers safe. And I really, really want to emphasize that LASD is doing that. And they are doing everything they can to keep the teachers safe.
Thank you, Ashna.
Our next speaker is Kimberly Fletcher.
Hi, I am speaking as both an employee of the district and as a parent. And while I actually don't have too much commentary either way about keeping our kids totally open or totally closed, my comment is focused at our high needs IEP students. My daughter falls into this category, and so does several other students that I care greatly about. And when we were closed earlier this year, those students really were falling between the cracks. And these are students that are not really eligible for LASD Plus because they have such high behavioral needs. And so if we were to close for a long period of time, I really ask the district to think about how we could safely get those students back in very small cohorts. I think a lot of teachers do feel safe if they have students in groups of 2 or 3. And what ways can we help our students who have behavioral needs that are this amount of time really does matter. My son will get back his reading time. He's in 3rd grade. He's going to be okay. My daughter in 1st grade, this may be time she never gets back, and she will never regain the speech time that she's missed this time. And so while we're discussing the big picture, I hope we also don't forget some of our students who have very specific, unique needs that are in between our general population and our SDC students. And that's all my comment for tonight.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Riley.
Hi, I'm sorry. I must have raised my hand by accident. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to the board and all the teachers. And I think I'm gonna just be happy with any outcome. So sorry about the hand raise.
It's perfectly all right. Thank you.
Weird.
Our next speaker is Jabina Ramdi.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for taking my, letting me talk. I'm an eye care provider practicing in Los Altos, and I have been practicing since May, seeing patients, following all the safety protocols. And I have also looked at the way that the LASD has sort of organized their protocols, and I feel very confident that this is a really good safety protocol. And I understand the anxiety level of our teachers here, going back and seeing students. I also felt that way when I first started seeing patients after being closed for about 7 weeks. But I have to say, once you set up the protocol, masking, social distancing, and just cleanliness, disinfection, I assure you, these are the best ways to protect ourselves. And I just wanted to tell you that I applaud LASD for spending all the researching and spending all the money towards setting up these protocols. And I just want to reassure you that I feel very confident in sending my daughter back to Egan. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you taking my call. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Stephanie Penn Elephant.
Hi, this is Ken Elephant. I'm the husband of Stephanie Elephant. And I just wanted to say how much respect we have for all of the teachers in the school district. We have 3 kids that go to Loyola, and we've really enjoyed our time there. There's been a lot of emotion that's been expressed in the calls today. And I want to just make sure that everybody knows that we've heard that. But I do think that it's super important for everyone to listen to the data and listen to what Emma Dorn and Joseph Field and Alyssa Ferris's guest said. It is safe to go back to school. I mean, imagine a society where the people in the supermarkets refused to go back to work in the supermarkets and we couldn't get food. Imagine a society where the doctors decided that they didn't want to go to the hospital, that the nurses didn't want to go to the hospital. We're all in this together, and we're expecting that the board here does the right things, listens to the data, listens to the emotion of the teachers, because we do feel for the teachers. There's no controversy about that. But I think it's super important for everybody to understand the anxiety that the kids have at home, the anxiety that the husbands have at home in terms of helping with the education at home, and the wives that are at home. Some of the wives are doing jobs at home while trying to do all the teleeducation. So we're asking the board to listen to the data and hopefully come up with a right decision that works for the teachers, and totally understand if a teacher doesn't feel comfortable coming back to school and you feel like you need to take a leave of absence. I totally support that. And when you feel comfortable to come back, you'll be welcome with open arms.
Thank you, Ken.
Our next speaker is Arati Dadla.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. My name is Arthi, and I'm also a parent of 2 Almond students, and I am also a nurse practitioner at Stanford. I work in oncology, and I've also been deployed to help out in the hospital setting with our COVID patients once a week. I just want to echo some of the sentiments that I've heard from other essential workers on this call, in that, we were very fearful in those first few months. And I think this is the same fear that the teachers are feeling now. And, although the numbers weren't as great then, we didn't understand this virus. We didn't know how to protect ourselves back in March and April. And I think we've learned a lot since then. I mean, we're now into month 9 or 10 of this, and we have a lot more data. We have a lot more information on how this is actually spread and how to protect ourselves. And I have to agree with the sentiment that we know now that masking works. And I have to say, as a provider who's been working since the beginning of this, once we put those protocols in place, we are not seeing employee to patient transmission. That's not what we're seeing in the hospital. So, I'm in those COVID units every week, and that's not what we're seeing amongst our colleagues. We are not catching this from our patients. And, you may think, okay, well, but you guys have, different PPE, different protection levels. That's probably true in those units where we have the sickest of our patients, but I also work in the clinic where that is very much like a community setting where we are taking care of patients just like we would be around students, where all you have is a mask. And again, we are not seeing provider to patient or patient to provider transmission. That's not the problem we are seeing. The problem we are seeing at the hospital is people catching the virus in the community and figuring out that they're positive, but not necessarily passing it to each other at work. As long as we're following masking, distance, not eating together, eating outdoors. And I think I would agree with the sentiment, applaud LASD that they have followed those protocols completely. And I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Just one last thing. I'm also a parent of a child who had a positive case in his cohort. And I want to give LASD a shout out that there was not a single transmission within that cohort. That child was probably got it in the community, and the students and the teachers were safe.
Thank you, Arti. Brad and Malik will be our last speakers.
Our next speaker is Malik Takal.
My name is Malik Takal. I am an 8th grade student at Egan Junior High. And although I commend LASD for the amazing work they've done to put safety protocols in place to protect our teachers, and the data that Mr. Bear provided is very supportive of reopening schools, I'm sure teachers have looked at the data. In fact, they're the people who taught me to look at data. They've worked hard for years. Many of the teachers I've talked to that are concerned about school reopening have worked for decades at LASD. Teachers are not superhumans. They may have eyes in the back of their heads and have huge amounts of patience, but they're just as vulnerable to this virus as we are. One of my teachers from 4 years ago, when I lived in the great state of New Hampshire, was a middle-aged man, probably in his mid-50s. He passed away from COVID this past week. Another reminder that this virus has no eyes. It will attack everyone. And I implore the board to seriously consider the request by LATA to postpone reopening schools. I want to get back as much as anyone else, but I hold the safety of our teachers and staff at our schools to the highest priority. I believe that this is the least that we can do to thank them for their service of many years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Brad Newman.
Hi, my name is Brad Newman. I am the parent of 4 children who have gone through LASD. 3 are still in it. I wanted to amplify some of the points I heard many parents make by citing to a New England Journal of Medicine article that was an in-depth study of what happened in Sweden when the schools were open. It was published January 6th of this year, and it's titled Open Schools, COVID-19, and Child and Teacher Morbidity in Sweden. And what it finds is what the medical practitioner parents I've heard on this call verify locally, that open schools, which Sweden has had throughout the epidemic, has not led to statistical morbidity or increased cases in teachers or students. So when we say we need to follow the science, that New England Journal of Medicine study, printed in the New England Journal of Medicine just last week, verifies that the risk is not sufficient to teachers or students to keep the schools closed. I also want to state a belief that many parents have shared with me privately, and that I hold myself. Looking at other states that have open schools and following the teachers' unions, it has become a politicized issue. And our kids and the best interests of our children must predominate. So I would suggest and recommend that the school board reopen the schools according to the safety protocols that it is following, and that we put our children's interests above politics when by this time we know what the science shows. I believe teachers are essential. They're as essential as Amazon delivery people or policemen and policewomen, cashiers, grocery clerks, and all of the other essential workers that the parents in this school district rely on. We need our teachers back in schools. We need the schools open. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I'd like to close public comment. Board members, would anyone like to open the discussion? Jessica.
All right, yeah, I'd love to open the discussion. I heard a lot tonight, and also having read all the emails we received from teachers and our parents. And I just wanted to kind of make sure I want to let them know that we're hearing them. So, here's what I'm hearing from our teachers and staff. At a high level, teachers and staff are concerned about their own and their students' safety, and their own and their students' mental health, and the effect of school in person has on both of them, with a surge in COVID cases locally. In many letters, teachers and staff stated that they felt their safety and mental health were not prioritized, or in the alternative, deprioritized. At a more granular level, while going through all these emails and the comments tonight, beyond that, there was what we heard from Jeff and from the LATA letter. Teachers are concerned about the many reports and their firsthand knowledge of students and their families not following COVID protocols outside the classroom and at home, or away, as the case may be, if they had been traveling. That LASD is not looking at the countywide and greater Bay Area surge numbers, and is not considering the exposure is beyond just Los Altos. They are concerned that the lack of routine testing of students means we don't have a full understanding of how many LASD students have COVID. That they are concerned about the inconsistency of several things, class sizes, and then the moving back and forth from virtual to blended, because it causes extra work caused by such, and the disruption of the students' routine. And also the amount of students they're exposed to. This is more so in the 6th through 8th grade teachers. And I understand for tonight that most of these concerns we'll need to talk about later in our closed session, but I do feel like there's some of the things we can bring up now that do not relate directly with negotiating with the teachers. So, but I think we can talk about how we can help our staff as it relates to the concerns about our families not following the COVID protocols. It is my personal observation that our teachers are working very hard to follow all the protocols inside and outside of the classroom. And it is a privilege for our LASD parents to get to send their kids into in-person hybrid learning. As a friend of mine had stated, people need to see our access to on-campus learning as a community compact. And to protect and preserve our school system, we must protect our teachers and staff by practicing COVID-safe behaviors. In a world where so much seems out of our control, we can control our families' behavior. It is quite literally the least a family unit can do in all of this. Therefore, I think we need to have I do think we need to craft some sort of board policy communicating such to our parents and we should have some consequences for not following COVID safe protocols. And it looks like we are at least communicating from what I understand from Jeff's presentation. So that's something I would like us to look into. And furthermore, I want to make sure we've gotten some more progress on getting even more routine testing of students and staff. I know Steve has brought this up in prior board meetings, and I think that is it for now. I just want to reemphasize that I've definitely heard everyone loud and clear, or read everyone loud and clear, and really appreciate all the feedback.
Thank you, Jessica. Steve, Brian, Vladimir. Vladimir.
Thanks. So over the last month or so, the board and the administration have received dozens and dozens of email letters, and we've listened to a number of comments tonight expressing concerns about opening for in-person learning. And most of those letters suggest that in-person learning should not resume until Santa Clara County stays out of the purple tier, which means no more than 7 cases per 100,000 daily for 2 consecutive weeks, or when 100% of teachers are vaccinated. And in addition, those letters have described the stress that teachers are experiencing, and it makes me sad to hear that. We've also heard from parents about how poorly their children are doing out of school. Many children are suffering educationally, emotionally, socially, and in some cases mentally. And so our challenge tonight is to balance these conflicting interests. In essence, what we're being asked to do is set aside our plan for reopening that's based on guidance given by the Santa Clara Public Health Department, and instead to follow guidance given by teachers. I don't think that's the right thing to do, and here's my reasoning. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that teachers are the experts when it comes to teaching. I defer to them on questions of curriculum and instruction. I know how well they know our own students, sometimes better than we know our children ourselves. I also want to acknowledge that teachers have a genuine desire to do what's best for our students. And many have written just that, and I believe that they're sincere. But I also know that teachers are not experts in epidemiology, infectious diseases, pandemics, or public health. And I don't think any of the letters, certainly not the ones I've read, and I think I've read almost all of them, had a public health justification for what teachers were asking for. And none of them attempted to balance the competing interests that we find ourselves faced with now. The second point I want to make is that the Santa Clara Public Health Department is staffed with professionals, and they have much more medical knowledge than teachers or I do. They have the training, they have the experience to evaluate highly technical papers, and they look at orders of magnitude more studies than I or any teacher has or ever will look at. And because they have a specialized knowledge, they know how one study relates to another, so they can make sense of all these studies. Lastly, the Santa Clara Public Health Department are trained to balance the competing interests of businesses, employees, students, teachers, parents, in other words, all the different components of our society. I can imagine that the most difficult part of managing a pandemic is not the medicine, but the message, the media, and the masses. And I'm sure that this has been told to them over and over again. Also, public health professionals have the distance to look at reopening schools from everyone's point of view, while keeping our collective welfare in mind. And so when the Santa Clara Public Health Department says that it's safe to reopen in a hybrid format, despite being in a purple tier, if certain protocols are followed by teachers, students, and parents, like Jessica suggested, I'm willing to accept their considered judgment. But note that my reliance on the guidance of the Santa Clara Public Health Department is not absolute. I'm willing to jettison their guidance if I find that they're not trained, experienced public health professionals, if they don't keep themselves up to date on the preponderance of the latest science, and if they don't keep our long-term best interests foremost in their mind. I think it's our duty as elected officials to be vigilant, to ask probing questions, to ask for explanation and justifications for their guidance. And so far, what I've heard satisfies me. I have two final comments. A number of teachers have reported that their concerns stem from their own special health situation. In other words, they're immunocompromised, or they live with someone who is, or they're pregnant, or live with an elderly parent, who have a partner who is also an LASD teacher, which exposes them to twice as many cohorts as other teachers. We must, and I'm sure the administration will, work with those teachers and the Santa Clara Public Health Department to make teaching safe for those teachers who have unique medical needs. The second comment, final comment, is I think we should do our utmost to test as many students, teachers, staff, and parents as possible. I would suggest that we create, we support, we make available a robust testing program, which I think will go a long ways to alleviating the fears that many people have about returning to school.
Thank you, Vladimir. Brian?
Thanks, Charlie. And thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. I really hear the passion in our teachers' voices, and I really hear the stress and the upset. And I understand that there's a difference between something being reasonably safe and that thing feeling reasonably safe. And with all due respect to Vladimir, I think teachers are experts in what goes on in their classrooms, which epidemiologists aren't always.
I didn't say that. I said that they're not experts in medical knowledge.
I understand. So I think that Mr. Hu's request on behalf of the Teachers Association to reopen the discussions doesn't seem unreasonable to me. The flip side of that, of course, is because of the way that formal negotiations work, I don't think I can really comment further on specifics in terms of the ideas I have about how we can address some of the teacher things. but like Jessica, although I didn't take probably as good notes as she does, I have read all the emails and I do take all the details in them seriously. So the other thing, I think, judging by the callers we have, this comment is probably preaching to the choir here, but we also take seriously the reports that there are families that aren't obeying the rules. I think there's a lot of families who got used to the county health orders being described as guidelines, and they're not anymore. And we need to communicate that, I think, in as many ways as we can, that quarantine after you traveled used to be a recommendation. It's not. It's anymore. It's a requirement. And I think we need to tell all of our families that, you know, we love all of our students, but if they travel, then their students are not welcome on campus for 10 days afterwards. And if we find out that they've been traveling, they will be escorted off of our campuses and kept off for 10 days. And, you know, same thing with gatherings outside the household. I'm actually not sure how many of our families have really sunk in that, you know, the kinds of gatherings that were sort of, in some circumstances, allowed back in the summer when it kind of looked like we had this under control are prohibited flatly under the stay-at-home order. So I hope, and this may constitute direction to staff, I hope that we're certainly, you know, following up aggressively. You know, nobody likes to be the person who turns in their neighbor or their friend, but I think for the sake of all our safety, some of us need to be those people. And, you know, if you're not comfortable, if you find out that you had somebody who traveled and then they're back and you see their kids going to school, if you're not comfortable saying something, email me, I'll say something, or, you know, pass it on such that we can follow up, because it really is going to take all of our efforts to keep our teachers safe. And that is, of course, one of our primary goals. So, you know, and, you know, if you're staring down if you or somebody you know is staring down the barrel of ski season and they're not willing to give up the Tahoe condo, then their kids are going to learn from home for the next few months. And they should start having those conversations with their teachers and their principals now. Otherwise, they're going to, you know, get a really embarrassing call and it's going to be extra disruptive for anybody. So I think we need to do all of those things. I know we've been doing a lot of those things already. Hopefully we can get even more aggressive. I think that's it for me for now.
Thank you, Brian. Steve?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything constructive to add, given the lousy ski season. I think people can give up their condos pretty easily. I do hear the emotion and the, to be honest, fear in teachers' voices, and I appreciate that. I think back to Jeff's original slides and the presentation focus that we were going down. I think the guidelines we have in place are ones that we have to keep first and foremost. So I'm not saying anything out of line with anyone who's spoken so far. I think they've been far more articulate about expressing where we're coming from and what we're trying to achieve here. And so that'll be part of the conversations we're going to be having as direction to staff as we go down the path here. But I want to make sure everyone knows they were heard, or virtually if it was in letter form. And we are aware that it is a scary moment in time. But I'd like to believe, and I do believe, that the district has actually implemented a lot of safety standards that the governor is just getting around to thinking about funding. If I look at the December 30th discussion that he came out with, as Jeff referenced, I think most of the things they're considering that we should be putting in place, we have in place. And a lot of those, it just, to everyone's point that has been made so far, is only successful when the community gets behind it and acts as education and delivery of education is important. So I'm just hoping that we can continue down that path of keeping those communication channels open and making sure everybody understands that. That's it.
Thank you, Steve. So first, I want to thank everyone who took the time to make public comment tonight and to send us your emails, keep sending us emails. All of you were heard. I just want you to know that. And I know it's a very emotional topic, and I applaud your bravery in putting yourselves out there. You know, so of my 5 of my other 4 board members, I do have a degree in public health, but my piece of the public health world is community health. So then even I don't presume to know more or know better than the experts at the county public health department. And, you know, one of the words that I appreciated Jeff using in his slides is that we're consistently following public health guidelines. And we haven't wavered. We don't pick and choose which guidelines we're going to follow. I feel like maybe some of our parents are doing that. Maybe they're tweaking the guidelines. Maybe they're thinking, if I come back from Tahoe and I get a negative COVID test, I don't have to quarantine. Like, we can't tweak like that. And it really disappointed me to hear that our parents, some of our parents, not all of you, some of our parents are not being as diligent about following these guidelines. You know, Jeff said in one of his slides that partnership with families and staff is essential to our success. And partnership, that's a really important word. And I saw this morning, I was at Oak, welcoming students back on campus. And from the staff perspective, you know, I saw Principal Attell. I got there a few minutes before 8. And by that time already, she had set up the entire blacktop with cones, with flags, with, you know, teachers' names on cones. I mean, everything was so set up, and I saw the amount of work that went into making our campus safe. There were direction arrows, which way you could walk. There was, you know, guidance on parents. You can't walk into campus and drop your kid off, you know, of course, unless they're kindergartners, but our staff is doing their part of their partnership. And I said to her, I really wish you didn't have to do this. I really wish you didn't have to come God knows how early to set up the school. But she did, and our staff do. And I appreciate their resiliency. I appreciate how much effort they're putting into making our campuses safe. It's not just our teachers, it's our staff who come in between and wipe down the desks, and you know, it's all of us. It's Randy making sure the ventilation system works the way that it's supposed to. It's all of us. So I really, really want to emphasize that partnership aspect of it. You know, I'm wondering, I do like, Jessica, I do like your idea about the board policy, but I'm wondering if that's not the only thing we need to do. And I'm wondering if our staff could find new ways to communicate with parents, you know, about how important it is, and maybe, you know, that there will be consequences. We are in a pandemic, but we are going through the pandemic together, and we're going to get out of the pandemic together. And it's really essential that everybody follows the public health guidelines. Following up with families, you know, if there are certain things that we can do as a district to make our teachers feel safer. I mean, I'm assuming that if they wanted more masks, if they wanted more plastic shields or whatever, you know, the money is there for that. But no amount of that can make up for the fact that parents are not following the guidelines as closely as we would like them to. I guess that, I mean, I don't know, Jeff, how we start with drafting a board policy, but I would like you to see if there are stronger ways for you to communicate with families, because we do need to make our teachers feel safe. I think that as a district, we have all the safety protocols. I certainly felt safe walking around Oak, safer than I do walking around Trader Joe's. I'll be super honest with you. But yeah, I think we do need to communicate a little bit stronger with our families.
I think I have just collecting what I have heard out of the mouths of the trustees, enough to assemble a policy, a draft of a policy to bring back on January 25th for the board to take a look at and potentially approve. I know we normally look at them a couple of times, but I think this one has a bit more urgency with it, and there's nothing to say that we can't begin implementation of that even ahead of the board formally adopting it. Yeah, okay. And I also have a note as well just about finding additional ways to communicate and recommunicate and remind and hold accountable is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we can say it enough times, you know, that we're all in this together. Okay, are there any other?
Charlie, can I, yeah,
Oh,
if I can
yes,
just
go
make a
ahead,
comment,
Brian.
just to
Yes,
be clear, I
please.
think we're all on the same page, but, you know, I think the authority that Jeff has just in terms of, you know, daily operations of the schools, I think covers anything that would be in that policy. So it's not a matter of for crafting a policy that we look at in 2 weeks and then it gets implemented. It's more of a implementing the changes that need to happen, and then the board will essentially review it written up as a policy the next time we meet.
Okay, that sounds good to me, Brian. Any other board members, any other final comments before we move off this agenda item? Yep. Okay, well, thank you. And again, thank you to everyone who took the time to make public comment and send us emails. Thank you to my board. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, Annual Performance Report on Solar Project. A representative from Terra Verde, the district's energy consultants, will provide an overview of the solar project's performance over the 2019-20 fiscal year. Mr. Kenyon.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. And I know this is what everybody has been waiting for, so we'll get right to it. And I'm going to introduce and turn it over to Phil Villagomez with Terra Verde. Phil, thanks for sticking with us. It's been a long time to get to this agenda item. So he's going to go over the report. There's an annual report and a quarterly report for the first quarter of this year, fiscal year, and probably can answer any questions you might have. So Phil, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate being here this evening, and I realize after hearing the serious discussions of this evening that sometimes these solar issues may seem inconsequential, but I know they also impact the financials of the district. So very happy to be here and to address concerns, updates, and also share news on the program. I think one way I'd like to go about it is kind of highlight some of the, just read a quick statement, and then I can address some issues as I see them. A good, I guess, way to kind of frame the discussion is that there are, just so that for folks that may not understand this, Terra Verde performs two kind of major analysis through the years, or two different reports. We do an annual report, which the one we're going over now covered the time period of July 2019 through June 2020. And then we follow that up with quarterly reports for each fiscal quarter throughout the year, which those quarterly reports are more focused on operational performance. But in the 2019-2020 fiscal year, you will see that the good news is that your systems produced over 2 million kilowatt hours of solar generation, resulting in savings for the district of almost $120,000 in a year. Now, like any system, you're going to have underperformance and overperformance. You'll see usage at the district changing. There are a lot of different impacts. There are issues that impact the performance of a system. And so I'll go over a few of these tonight and address them. One of the things that you'll notice about the way we show an annual report is that we'll give you quarterly information, and then you'll also see an overall production number for the year. And we break it out at Terra Verde so that anything between 96% and 100 or greater is is above expectations. 90 to 96 would be normal performance, and anything under 90% is something that needs to be addressed and can be considered less than normal performance. So here, if you look at the year, you're very close to hitting that good performance range, but we were a little under. And we have decided, or we looked at the main issues, and there were three issues that we feel caused this kind of separation, or this inability to meet that above performance record. The first one was a system outage at Loyola School. And if you take a look at this I want to briefly show you, we track issues and we'll date them when we find them, and we try to address them, and we'll continue to track them until they're addressed properly. But the Loyola school system, the issue that happened there, even though it was a short, somewhat short 71-day issue, this entire system had to be shut down for safety reasons when there was arcing seen at site. So that issue that needed a site shutdown for safety basically impacted December 2019 and January 2020. And you'll see in the reports that we go over that that was one of the major issues. When you have a system going completely down, you're going to lose generation. And what started that particular issue, if you go all the way back to the beginning, and we look at this, that it said, you know, possibly some of the issues here, when they start looking at it, okay, what we notify them, and then we try and find the root of the cause. But basically, it's up to the O&M provider and then the manufacturer or installer to say, hey, what's the best decision here? And they decided that basically that they felt that this system had to be shut down for safety reasons. So that was one of the issues that caused underperformance last year. There was also an issue at Springer that where there was looked to be a vandalized service panel where a cover was pried loose, and that resulted in a lengthy outage as well. I believe that one is up here where we tracked that one. Again, it was only for 22 days, but that can impact when you have systems that are going down or not performing. Any disruption in that will cause a delay. But that's one thing Terra Verde is doing. We're looking at these, we're doing daily dedicated monitoring, and then remaining in contact with your providers to make sure it gets resolved. But another thing to notice about this report, and I think this is a question that came up a few times, is how to understand it. So as I mentioned before, anything under 90% is a little red flag. 90 to 96 is very acceptable, and then a 96 and above is exceptional. So we have most of the sites production in that good range. And then we'll notice when we'll mark if there's underperformance at different sites. And so as I mentioned, the Springer issue and Loyola are, you know, it shows up here that those were two trouble sites throughout the year. On an energy usage basis, it's always good to know, basically, we set baselines of production of what to expect, what usage to anticipate at a site. And again, if a site is using less than expected, it's noted. If they're in a good range, that's noted. But if they're using much more than was originally expected, it shows up on this side. And here you can see both Egan and Oak Avenue is exceeding their baseline production usage. And there are several things that can happen there. And basically it's a function of what's occurring at the school. You know, is there increased usage at the site from either lighting, HVAC, or electric vehicle charging sites? And I did notice that we went back and looked at our 2017 lines here, and we saw increased usage at Oak Elementary starting in September of 2019 and continuing up to this time period. So I will work with the district to find out and verify if the chargers that were installed by PowerFlex, if it was around that time, and what the impacts or what changes could be done to alleviate this, or maybe we just need to make a note of, since it was a significant change during this time, to reflect that in the baseline numbers. Let's see, okay. So basically for your annual report, that's how it's broken up. We show you overall numbers, and then we'll break it down by site. When you look at the overall numbers, yes, your base total usage relative to baseline overall is still within the acceptable range. But when you look at those individual sites, that's when you see problems. Okay. I wanted to also mention the quarterly report here, and then also show a graph when I talk about one particular problem, because For the quarterly report, we're now showing this 94% of solar production with a challenging number in September, which could be, this was September 2019. And I'm 2020. And this would be, we're probably estimating this could be done from a haze, wildfire ash, any type of soiling. We feel that soiling had an impact for September. But there were there was an issue at Egan that I wanted to bring up. And that was the intermittent inverter going, kind of showing some up and down performance there. So I do have a graph here that I wanted to show you. And so for the 5 inverters at Egan, you can see here, each one is a different color code. And there's 2 days, there's September 15th and September 20th, where we saw notable drops where the inverter would drop offline for a little bit and then go back up to production. And that happened on 2 days during this week. So we're tracking, you can see all 5 kind of showing that normal curve of solar production going up and down. But on these 2 days, we definitely saw problems. The production, the O&M provider and Forefront, both were made aware of this issue, but could not identify a specific reason for this drop off and performance returned to normal. But we did notify them and share this information with them.
Phil, we weren't seeing that, the graph you were referencing regarding Egan on your screen.
You can't see that?
We see the summary still?
Okay, let me see. It's up on my screen. Let me pop that and share. Ah, I see. How about now? Yeah. Okay, so I'll just review that really quickly. Here's September 15th, and here's the 20th. The inverter in question was this one here, inverter number 3, which you can see in a green line. So normally all 5 would follow this solar curve throughout the day, kind of peaking with your max solar production. But unfortunately, on these 2 days, you can see the green line dropping off. And basically that means it tripped offline on this day and on this day. So it was an intermittent problem. Forefront confirmed that once they looked into it, it was operating back at 100%. And they did say that no further action was needed here, but it did have, basically this was the inverter problem at Egan that we identified. And of course, the higher usage at both Springer and Oak is being shown in Q1 as well. So I'll just go back to that one really quickly. Let's go to look at Oak real quick here. Each school is broken out, but I want to just go to Oak so you can see how we're looking at that. Here that is. So you'll see the solar production. And again, for those of you that haven't seen this, we have a typical year expected. You have a weather adjusted based on what's happening in your overcast or weather, your solar radiance, and then actual production. So you'll see this on the top graph, but on this one is the concerning one where you have baseline numbers and then total usage relative to baseline increasing. And that has been consistent at this school. So that is a follow-up item that I'd like to work with you all on to make sure that if this does require baseline adjustment, we can make that happen. But I do think that this may have something to do with the electric vehicle chargers. The good news is that if you do have those there, and if they are the PowerFlex that I'm familiar with, they're a smart charger that we can get a lot of data from. All right, because we did go back to 2017 and we saw more of an average usage for both July, August, and September. The average was coming in about 20 to 25,000 kilowatt hours. So it's not hugely different, but it's enough to show up in a percentage wise when you look at the overall. So those were the kind of the highlights I wanted to share today from the reports, showing you how we get the data, how we look at each individual school, and how there's still bright spots because we're showing you your productions both overall and individually, and then tracking and respond to issues as they show up. Let me just go back to the top of this quarter really quickly. Yeah, and so these reports, you'll be able to every quarter see how the solar is performing. This kind of shows you how many total kilowatt hours and what percentage that's delivering to you. And at the end of the year and each quarter or annual report, you'll see what your total savings have been as a result of your avoided cost. So I know I said a lot. Hopefully I've covered the highlights there, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, and I just want to interject, Phil, thank you. And I think while it's great that we installed solar, it's equally important that we're having this ongoing follow-up, monitoring on a regular basis. And Terra Verde's doing a great job of that and helping us pinpoint problems and trying to resolve them as they come up. So thank you, Phil, and turn it back to you, Shali.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Phil. Does the board have any questions about Phil's presentation? Let me just slide this. Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. And I don't see any hands up. Should I give you another second to get, just kidding. Okay, I'm gonna close public comment. Who would like to open the discussion on this agenda item? Vladimir.
Yes, thanks. Phil, I just have a couple of questions here. If I look at the quarterly report and I look at the second graph you have there, for July, and this kind of thing I'm asking a question about occurs in multiple places. It goes below 0 there. What's the interpretation?
So that reflects a very positive thing. So that would be exports to the grid. So that shows that when you have enough solar production where you've, in that particular month, we have seen exports. So that's kind of how we reflect it in the graphs to let you know that you're benefiting from those exports.
Okay, thank you. If you go to your other presentation, the one that has the pages of actual bill and net bill savings, for most of the schools that are involved, there seems to be 1 month which has a really large negative number. Just to pick it on page 17 of the 23 there, Almond Elementary, number 1, the net bill savings are all positive, except for 1 month where it's largely negative. And that seems to be a pattern that's repeated in most of the other schools. And I'm wondering if there's sort of like an explanation for that.
Okay, and you said that's on page 17 of the annual report?
Yeah. I just picked the first school on the list there.
Phil, I think that's the truing up with PG&E.
Ah, yes. So let me see if I can share this here. Yeah. All right, can you see that right now? Is that showing up the Almond Elementary?
Yeah, so from February 18th to March 17th, the rightmost column has a big negative number, whereas all the other columns don't.
Yeah, that's how PG&E does their annual, what they call their true-up bill. it's one of those things that how they structure their invoicing, they do it once a year. And instead of spreading it out on every invoice, you'll see this time and time again. Excuse me. This is something that we actually verify for you. When we see these true ups, we will validate those based on your production and usage. So anytime you'll see these bills, you know that that's been verified by Terra Verde, and that is what they call the net meter true up from PG&E.
Okay, thanks. A final question. Given your comments about Oak and Egan having an excess of usage, any further comments there? You're going to look into that and try to.
Yeah, I mean, my just knowing from the research I've been able to do, the first place we usually look at is any type of large consumption at the school. We did have some other districts that during COVID, they were moving kitchen production for, school meal distributions to one school. And so we would see kitchen volumes increase at that site. But if there are electric vehicles or another one that can be a hidden kind of usage of power, I had some notes on EVs. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with that, but depending on how many you have, we can do analysis on the level 2 kilowatt hour burn on a anticipated per day. And we'd be happy to look into like doing some analysis on EV charging to see what the impact is to your invoices.
As far as I know, most of our schools support electrical vehicle charging at night by residents, local residents. And I've been assured that that does not come out. We don't foot that bill. So it's okay. All right, that's all I had.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Vladimir. Brian, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a couple of comments just to follow on the electrical vehicle thing. The billing for Oak Avenue in terms of savings does look like it's in line with the other schools. So my guess is that it's some kind of metering glitch where Oak is wired differently or something, and the electricity for those chargers is showing up in the usage somehow. Not knowing the architecture, I'll stop guessing. But I would like to run that down. And then this comment may be more for Randy, but may not be. I don't think I'm not sure if we've gotten an update on the electrical vehicle chargers and just some kind of report on what usage looks like. And it might be nice to get that when you've got a slow week as well, just so that we can put a nice story in the paper and show off how much we're benefiting the community.
Yep, good, Brian.
Great.
That's
Any other comments or questions for Phil or Randy? Steve.
I do have a question. I think it goes back to the first page of this document, or pretty close to it, where you had anticipated an actual production across. I think it totaled these tables at the very beginning.
Okay.
We were significantly under or overspending. I don't know how you want to put that. I guess my question becomes: at what point is there a point where we would reevaluate? We install enough panels that the anticipated usage was so under projected that it makes sense to expand our production? And is that ever something that's happened with other districts?
Majority, the kind of industry standard for solar installation would be that people estimate to cover their solar panels to allow for them to allocate or provide between 78 and 84% of their anticipated production or their consumption. That's pretty much standard, because once you go over that amount, you are at risk for losing or having excess power that you can't recuperate through either exports to the grid or through those true up from net energy metering. It's a bit of a function of several factors, but usually we don't recommend that people build out in excess of 80% of their anticipated load. Again, that is dependent on several factors, so I'd have to look into those for you. But I think that this one, this was challenged on a couple of areas. If you look at, delving down into each one, and that's why on the annuals you can kind of look at, okay, what did this 62 represent, and then dive down to each location, and then we try to help find those issues. But I think that here the reasoning was because of that inverter problem where you had a school site that was delivering 0, and that was the big impact. So even though the baselines are set to cover you at around 80, you can still reach like in the 90 and 100% of that anticipated, because even though you're expecting to cover that, 80%, if you're hitting that, then you should have good numbers. This was that's that 62% reflects that loss of that inverter for a month and a half.
Great. Any, Vladimir?
Phil, just an off-the-cuff evaluation. Do you think Forefront's doing a good job?
Yeah, we track. They're doing a good job. We did have issues with them. The one issue this year was that they were the force majeure that they had issued for some of the California wildfires. We felt they weren't being clear or giving us a lot of transparency there. So we've been working with them to make sure, which districts were impacted, what was the term of their force majeure. So, and I will say that they were the only developer provider that did call a force majeure for that. And so, but other than that, I think you can see the challenges. Most of our providers, we have to basically, how can I put it? We have to be aggressive with them to respond to issues. And so in our notes, you'll see there sometimes that it takes a while for them to respond when we notify them of a problem. That's something we see across the board, but they eventually, they do respond. And so I think right now there's nothing that would give me pause or that would tell me that they're not doing, meeting their obligations.
Phil, you or maybe Jessica may have to explain force majeure to.
Yeah, sure. That's just if there's a condition and the force majeure, if there's an act of God or a contractual issue that they claim that will give them an out to a contractual obligation, they can claim this issue where they say that during this time period, their requirements or their guarantees are no longer intact because they have no control over it. So the reason that would impact you guys would be for if you have a performance guarantee where they say, hey, we're going to guarantee our equipment to perform at X level, then they are held to that contractually. And usually there's, after a 5-year period, a financial payout if they fail to meet that. In the case of the California wildfires, they issued a force majeure for certain counties, and it was very unclear, and we're still actually trying to get them to give us information on final closeout of that force majeure activity. But that's another thing that we do. We track to make sure that these providers are living up to their obligations. And then if they do have a clause in the contract says that if they don't live up to it, then they're going to owe you money at the end of 5 years. And we track those guarantees.
Any further comments or questions for Phil or Randy? Okay, I don't have any either. Thank you very much, Phil. And thank you, Randy. We're going.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it very much. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you for having me. Have a good evening.
Bye. All right, moving on to our next agenda item, institutional approval of an LASD teacher induction program. Mrs. McGonigal will share the rationale and process for applying for institutional approval for an LASD teacher induction program from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Mrs. McGonigal.
Charlie, sorry, Sandra, if I can jump in for a second. Charlie, technically we need a motion to continue this meeting past 10 o'clock, so we might want to do that now.
Okay.
I move that we continue this meeting past 10 o'clock.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Motion was made by Brian to continue this meeting past 10 o'clock. Jessica has seconded. Roll call vote. Vladimir.
Yes.
Steve.
What he said, yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Jessica. Okay. Yes. Awesome.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Sandra, please.
Excellent. Well, noted, it is solidly past my bedtime right now. Happy to talk to you because I knew when I asked Marcy to post this in the board agenda on Thursday or Friday, whatever day it went out, this one needs a lot of talk over because many people don't even have any idea what teacher induction means or its importance. So I'm excited tonight to talk to you about the possibility of us starting our own teacher induction program in Los Altos School District. And so step one, and I'll take you through it, is really applying for institutional approval from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And that commission is a subset of the CDE, California Department of Education, whose sole job is focused on the credentialing of teachers. So in order to begin our own induction program, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, we must apply for approval from this group who kind of runs all of teacher credentialing. So next slide, I'll go into the details and please ask your questions. So what is teacher induction? I would argue that teacher induction is one of the most important things we do within our school district. It is a 2-year support program for beginning teachers. And so when you are a beginning teacher, you've gotten your credential after your bachelor's degree. The credential you get is called a preliminary teaching credential. And teachers have up to 5 years to turn their preliminary credential into a clear teaching credential. And one of the pathways to get that clear teaching credential is called induction. And induction is a program. So in our school district, we have, depending on each year and the number of participating teachers, we have 2 teacher mentors who work specifically on a weekly basis in a deep and meaningful way with all of our new teachers to help them kind of pass through this program where they build upon the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they got within their initial credentialing program and really see that happening in action once they're with teachers over those 2 years and working directly with students and colleagues. And it's a really phenomenal job embedded mentoring program where at the end, you end up with your clear credential. And it is a significant amount of work on the part of our participating new teachers. They go through several cycles of inquiry over the course of the school year. They look at their special populations of students. They're recording video lessons or having observations by their mentor teachers and getting really outstanding, direct and critical feedback to improve their performance on how they're teaching and working with our students and families. And we know that a high quality teacher induction program really results in better equipped teachers, more satisfied teachers, and teachers who've gone through a high quality induction program tend to stay in the profession longer. I'm sure you've heard in the news that, you know, the average age of a new teacher, not age, but tenure of a new teacher is sometimes 3 to 5 years, and then it's just too much to handle. So we know with a great induction program and a great mentoring cadre that teachers will remain within the profession, get their clear credential, and see this as a great lifelong career. Next slide. So we are incredibly excited tonight to bring to you the concept of us creating our own LASD induction program. For many years, as long as I've been within LASD, we have contracted with the Silicon Valley, Santa Cruz, it might be the other way around, New Teacher Project, which is a local organization out of the Santa Cruz County Office of Education, and they are our credentialing approval organization. So we've been a part of that cadre. Many of our surrounding school districts around us have their own teacher induction program. And as we've moved through the years, and we all love our district so much, we really love the idea of beginning our own teacher induction program so we can really make sure that the work our new teachers are doing is really aligned with our culture, with our vision, that the actual work they have to do is most applicable to the work they're doing in their classrooms and the work we want them to be doing with students and their families. And ultimately, we really want to make sure that our new teachers have a terrific, impactful experience, and they will want to stay with us in LASD because of our induction program and experience and the training that they receive in order to really improve their practice. Next slide. So, yep.
I think it would be, did you acknowledge, did you mention our current mentors?
Well, I didn't mention them by name. So this year
they are so good. I think it would be appropriate to mention them.
Absolutely. They are phenomenal. This year we have Sarah Gerlinger and Alex Schroeder, two longtime LASD teachers who are working with I think this year we have somewhere around 15. So they're both doing some additional IST work along with their new teacher mentoring. But it's so great to have a solid teaching mentor partnership, the training, the experience, and the expertise. One of my favorite things each spring is to read the feedback from our new teachers around their experience working with our mentors. And it is something that our teachers value because our mentors, our new teacher mentors, truly do a tremendous job. And let's just be real, they are the ones who came up with this idea. Like, I think we could run our own program and we could even do it better. So we absolutely love the concept of developing our own induction program. So of course we had to do a little bit of research to understand how might we go about doing this, since we've been part of the New Teacher Project for many, many years. So we all attended a CTE, that California Commission for Teacher Credentialing, training that laid out the 5-stage process. This is very simplified for you, but stage 1 is truly the board has to give approval that we can begin the process. That's stage 1. Stage 2 and 3 is that our district as an entity has to be approved by the commission, that we are able financially, we have the expertise, we have the resources to be able to develop an induction program. And then once we get that approval, then stage 4 and 5 is really about defining our specific program and what that will look like, and getting the stamp of approval from the state for that as well. It includes many site visits. It includes sitting in front of the board, answering questions from the CTC to make sure that our program would be adequate and meet the standards that are outlined by the state of California for teacher induction. And they have terrific standards that we work with currently. Next slide, Marcy. So every time I talk to Jeff or Randy about the idea of a new program or new idea, Randy always wants me to lay out a little bit of financials of what this might look like. So we went back for several years and looked on the left there as we've been working with the new teacher project, on average, this year we have fewer just because of the pandemic, but on average, we've had about 28 participating teachers a year. Again, it's a 2-year program for each of our teachers. We pay the cost for our teachers to earn their clear credential through induction. So as we have partnered with New Teacher Project, we pay the New Teacher Project $2,000 per teacher when we provide the LASD mentor. On occasion, the numbers don't work out right, or sometimes we have a specialty, such as special education, where we might need a contract mentor. That cost is $5,200 per teacher if we use a contract mentor and not one of our own teachers. So on average, over the last several years, we've paid somewhere between $55,000 and $65,000 a year for induction. If we fast forward to wanting to offer our own program, there are some one-time fees in that middle bucket there. But this year, the state has decided to waive those fees, but it's a $3,500 one-time setup fee. If we can get through stage 3 by June, those fees would be waived. And then once our program, through all the stages, once our program was approved by the CTC, our ongoing cost to the state is $1,300 a year, and that's for up to 50 teachers, not per teacher, but up to 50 teachers. I threw along the bottom there this idea, our mentor costs really don't change whether or not we're going with the New Teacher Project or within our own induction program, because we believe our mentors need to have a manageable caseload, and that really just varies based on the number of new teachers requiring induction each and every year. So it would be some significant savings, but that's really not why we want to do it. In my mind, that's just a bonus should we go forward with our own induction program. Next slide. So tonight, I am asking, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about induction, but we are asking for your approval so we can get going on the process. It would very likely be not on our end, but because of the speed of the CDE and the CTC, likely take us about 1.5 years. So we wouldn't really have our new program up and running until, what would that be, 22-23 school year. And then should you give us the approval tonight, we will be very happy to come back as we move through the different stages over the next several months and over the course of the year. So I'm happy to answer questions, and perhaps somebody might want to make some public comment.
Awesome. Board members, do you have any clarifying questions for Sandra on her presentation?
I just have one quick one. As it relates actually to the cost comparison. I guess, sorry, I'm tired now too. It's past my bedtime. The mentor costs, I guess you're saying they'll remain the same whether we were outsourcing or whether we had it in-house. But if, say, we had so many teachers, we may end up having to have more mentors.
Correct. I would say over, my 10 years in this district, we've had probably 2.5 to 1 mentor each year.
Okay.
And that really just depends on the numbers. And, some years we've contracted with a specialist because we had a specific credential, or we were just a little bit over in our numbers. So we've done some contracting, but most typically we have 2 mentors. Over my 10 years, it's been about 2 mentors, 1 to 2 LASD teachers serving as that mentor position, which is really what we love the most.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Any other questions for Sandra on the presentation? Vladimir.
So Sandra, if I understand, we're already doing an induction program, but it's somebody else's program.
Yep.
And you want to bring it in-house and do it ourselves. And the cost it's not a big deal either way. So the question is, what do we get out of doing it ourselves as opposed to having it done by somebody else?
Yeah, I would say we get a little bit more creative control over what our program looks like for our participating teachers. Right now, we really follow the guidelines of the induction program set forth by the New Teacher Project, and it has certainly served us well. We value our relationship with the New Teacher Project, but we certainly believe having a more homegrown experience for our teachers would result in better outcomes for our newest teachers that we really want to see as lifelong LASD teachers.
Okay. My inclination, by the way, is that if you're supportive of this, then I'm supportive of it also. But I'd like to poke at it a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely.
What happens if we don't hire any teachers without clear credentials? Oh, we only hire teachers with
a clear credential. Yeah, then that particular year, we would not be in need of induction, right? But we would still have a certified induction program. Just in one particular year, we wouldn't have any participating teachers. Is that what you're asking?
My question is really, why don't we always do that? We would only hire teachers that have experience. In other words, we don't hire any new teachers.
It's a philosophical question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I don't know. I have no idea what the answer is. I can imagine that cost has something to do with it.
Yeah, I would say there's a cost issue, Vladimir. I'd say that there is a benefit to having a balanced staff as well.
Absolutely.
Right, of newer teachers and more veteran teachers. I think as you bring in teachers into the induction program, as Sandra was talking about earlier, you have the opportunity to help shape them into the, that next step of high quality teacher as well. Whereas if you bring in a veteran teacher, you don't have that opportunity through the induction program.
Okay, all right. Okay. I'm
Jeff?
for it.
Okay. We have to go through public comment first. Yes, Jeff.
Nice quick question. A couple of Sandra, we haven't talked a lot about this. So what one is, I just haven't asked detailed questions. One is there is ancillary benefit we have gotten historically from the New Teacher Project in terms of training and coaching and all of those sorts of things. That won't be there. How are we going to make sure that we get our mentors that type of professional development?
Yeah, there actually is a consortium, which I didn't realize because we have never had to look outside of the New Teacher Project, but there is actually a consortium of our fellow school district from Palo Alto to Cupertino to many of our surrounding districts who meet on a fairly regular basis to talk about induction, to talk about pedagogy, to talk about, they have conferences. There's all sorts of great resources, both people and training available within that consortium.
And then do we have to, if we do this successfully, do we have to go through a reauthorization or recertification period in 10 years?
Yes, I don't remember the number of years, but yes. Yeah, site visits. It's kind of like a WASC. They compared it to the WASC. Like you get your initial accreditation. I think after year 4, you are working in your program, and then a committee comes to see it in action.
Got it.
Any further questions before we go to public comment? Okay, I'd like to open this up for public comment. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes, and it looks like we have one taker for public comment.
Our first speaker is Pepe Yu.
Hi. I don't have a public comment. I had more of a question. So I'm really excited to hear about more investment in teacher development. I think that's great. And then I think when Sandra said that we get more creativity, and it sounds like more agency in how we kind of shape that program, I wondered if we'll include more equity related training in the induction program. Specifically, I thought it might be really impactful to help train the teachers before, at least at the early stages of their career, on how we're ensuring that there's equity practices day to day. Examples I can think of is basic things like the selection of anchor texts in their classroom, or how they facilitate an inclusive environment in the classroom, or even how they resolve conflict, right, with awareness about how some students are, punished at higher rates than others. So I would be curious to hear about that agency giving us more flexibility in ensuring that our teachers are hearing about the importance of equity in our schools.
Thank you, Pepe. It does look like we have another public comment.
Our next speaker is Carrie Berzelius.
Hi. I don't usually stay on this late, and I'm really glad I did. Just because I want to say, Sandra, this is really exciting. I have gotten to be both a coach and been working with our coaches and worked with our new mentor coaches and see the work that they do. And I just want to, as a teacher's voice, just say what amazing work they're doing, and just say it's very exciting to hear this kind of program come into our district because of the type of work that we do. And yeah, so that's my comment. I'm so excited. This is a great idea.
Thank you, Carrie.
Our next speaker is Laura Wiley.
Hi, I'm Laura. I've taught in Los Altos for 10 years now, and actually went through induction with the New Teacher Project. And it was a great experience, but I will say that one of the most special parts of it was that my mentor was someone who I knew growing up in the community. Like, I was a Mountain View Wisman school district student, and my mother taught in that district for years. And when I came to Los Altos, I was excited to really make a name for myself as my own teacher. And I was allowed to do that with grace and reassurance from a lot of people that I knew had my back. And while we still used the New Teacher Project, it really was that connection I had with my mentor. And it was because it was a community connection. And so I think this whole process of us starting our induction program here in Los Altos is so exciting. I will also say that I am now an instructional support teacher in Los Altos. I have been this is my 4th year. And the work that I do alongside our mentors is so beneficial to our teachers that I think bringing it in-house is only going to provide, and it's going to be a better experience both for our teachers and the greater outcome of the type of teachers that we both have, and those that, the new teachers and the veterans. Like, we really have something special here in Los Altos, and our mentors, I've worked very closely, particularly with Sarah, and alongside with her work and the work we do with the ISTs, we are supporting our teachers for our current community. It's not about this greater county. It's here in Los Altos. What can we do? What are we seeing across classroom to classroom, school to school, across the district, where we're really able to hone in on what our teachers and therefore our students need most? So I'm gonna echo Sandra's excitement and Carrie's excitement that she shared. And I think this is a great next step to support our new teachers and ultimately all students and teachers in Los Altos. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Our next speaker is Chris Hazelton.
Oh, hello. I'm so happy that I stayed on this late to hear about this. I also want to echo what some of the other teachers said. I found in my induction program that I did through LASD that my relationship with my mentors was extremely important. Those conversations that we had about student learning and talking about how to use data and how to change my practices as a teacher really made it a really meaningful experience that I still feel like I use to this day. I was really lucky to have Greg as one of my mentors at one point, and then I had Sarah Gerlinger, and I just want to echo what the other teachers are saying about how effective that was to help them. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Like a mentor love fest going on. We really do have the best folks, and we want to build that, right? Continue to build that within our community and make sure that the work we do with our teachers just has the best context for their work that we can have. It's very exciting.
That's awesome. And I'm super excited that this idea came up from the mentors themselves.
Sure.
It's just so organic. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment because I don't see any more hands up. Would any board members like to provide comment on this agenda item?
Just wanted to remind Sandra how many great teachers came out of Gardner Bullis.
I want to remind Sandra that great teachers came out of all of our schools.
Absolutely. 10 schools this year, full of chock full of great teachers. And I did want to just, I know Pepe spoke much of our conversation about what she brought up, making sure that we are choosing the right things to train teachers around equity, around culturally responsive pedagogy. Those are the types of the decisions that we would like to be able to make for our community. And absolutely, it's high on the list, highest on the list.
Sandra, do you think you can get through stage 3 by June?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay, if there are no more comments, can I have a motion to approve an LASD teacher induction program?
I'd like to move that we approve an LASD teacher induction program as presented.
Thank you, Vladimir. Can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Jessica. Any further board discussion? All right, so the motion was made by Vladimir and seconded by Jessica. We'll now do a roll call vote. Vladimir?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. I'm excited to see the development of this program.
Exciting.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sandra.
Thank you.
Oh, you're up next.
Yep.
TK through 5 math adoption planning.
Almost as exciting.
Mrs. McGonigal will update the Board of Trustees on planning for a formal math curriculum adoption for TK through 5 math in LASD. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Truly almost equally as exciting. And you can see that I just stuck with the same presentation template, made a copy and changed the content, trying to make it easy for viewers and for myself. So tonight I'm here to talk about getting started with a TK5 math adoption process. We have spent several years, the past few years as a district, talking about math instruction, math curriculum in LASD. And we've landed on this question that appears on the front here. This idea, do we stay with our currently adopted Envision math curriculum, which we adopted, Jeff might know the numbers, I want to say more than 10 years ago, and then kind of updated the adoption when Common Core came out. So we stuck with Envision when Common Core came out.
That was
Whatever.
probably 13 or 14 years ago.
Yeah, so it's been quite some time.
For the original adoption, right? And
Yes,
then
for the original adoption. Common Core was probably about 7-8 years ago is my.
I think Alyssa was in your position at the time. Yep.
So this question has come about over the last 2 years, I would say. Do we stay with our currently adopted Envision curriculum, or do we want to move forward and attempt to formally adopt the curriculum that was recently put out by San Francisco Unified School District? And I'll say this question came about as we started doing work within the district around math instruction, because we learned from our elementary, our K-5 teachers, that anywhere, depending on the grade level, only about 40 to 60% of our teachers were actually using the adopted math curriculum Envision. And we heard from teachers, some teachers loved it, some teachers didn't like it at all. So they were kind of developing their own curriculum. They were buying Teachers Pay Teachers curriculum. They were using online resources for curriculum. And then a cadre of our teachers went to some training and learned about the San Francisco Unified School District curriculum, and a little grassroots effort began in LASD. So next slide. So it is a question we want to answer. We are looking for alignment around math instruction. So realizing several years ago that we did not have even anywhere close to 100% of our teachers using our adopted math curriculum felt very problematic. This is pre-pandemic. We know that curriculum is really important, and continuity of curriculum from grade level to grade level is important for students, and it is especially important for students who struggle the most academically. The common language, the common formatting, resources, all of that play an important role in the success for students. But we also know that curriculum matters a lot on how that particular curriculum has been developed. So I will just ask you to look at this beautiful graphic that came out of the CNI department last year around trying to define when we say we want to do math well, what does that mean? And a high quality math experience for kids has to bring these three pieces in. It has to have good computational and procedural practice, right? We do absolutely need to have kids who know how to multiply, divide, add and subtract, how to work with fractions, all of those computational procedural pieces. But that's not enough. And so we really need to make sure that our curriculum is providing many opportunities for students to build their conceptual understanding, that they really can explain why math works. Just saying that, spitting out a formula does not mean that I understand why that formula works, right? So that conceptual understanding is really important. And then we also really want to make sure that students can do the problem solving. They can apply the math. They see where it works. So those three pieces, when we're looking at high quality curriculum, we want to make sure that those three areas are really well addressed. We know in all of education, no one curriculum does everything particularly well. I think my colleagues who are still attending tonight would say that Envision probably does, out of those three, their best area, strongest area is the computation and procedural skills. There's lots of practice. And the folks would say that the San Francisco Unified curriculum really focuses on the conceptual understanding and the problem solving. So it is this really interesting, like which one is easier to supplement, knowing that one curriculum, regardless of where you look, and believe me, we've done a whole lot of looking at a curriculum, is going to do it all. So next slide, Marcy. We would really like to take a sincere look at San Francisco Unified Math curriculum this year, because we were in a pandemic and we needed to align around math instruction. And because we wanted to support teachers so they were not building and finding and creating all sorts of things. We do have all of our K-5 teachers using San Francisco math units that our ISTs are developing or with their learning plans. But we're really looking, hopefully post-pandemic, as we look into next year, what do we want for our curriculum ongoing? So a little bit about San Francisco math curriculum. It was developed through San Francisco Unified with all sorts of amazing partners. Most of our teachers heard about it in the last year through Silicon Valley Math Initiative. You know, we've sent, last year, I think we sent 35 teachers to their summer training. Each year we train a big chunk of teachers through this terrific project, and they worked closely with San Francisco Unified to develop this really terrific curriculum. Each unit is designed around a series of tasks. So you go back to that circle, those tasks help build our conceptual understanding, and they are problem solving tasks. And then each lesson is built around, it starts with a math talk. A task is presented and it goes through a launch, explore, summarize experience where there's great conversation. And then the curriculum has spiraled homework. So something that you were taught previously comes back. So you continue to maintain those skills over time. It's a different curriculum, very different than our Envision curriculum. Last year, we kind of started some of this work at the beginning of last year. We had our, next slide, Marcy. We had our kinder, second, and fourth grade voluntary teachers, probably around close to 15 to 20 total across those 3 grades, who worked with our ISTs or with Greg Drummond or with Beth Leach in a kind of focused working group. They were, I don't think we called it a pilot, but they were using this supplemental material in addition to Envision, in addition to some additional materials, and overwhelmingly thought it was a superior core curriculum, knowing that things will need to be supplemented, which is why we went forward with using it this year in the pandemic, as opposed to moving forward with Envision during this pandemic time. We would like to go down the adoption process and look closely at both curriculums. So our plan is later this month to present to Curriculum Council the process that we want to go down. We will have teachers who are currently using the San Francisco curriculum, but really looking at closely the criteria for adoption and doing some evaluation of both Envision and San Francisco Unified. A typical adoption process in a non-pandemic year would be a short period of using one curriculum and then a short period of using the other curriculum, filling out an evaluation rubric, getting some feedback and what have you, and figuring out which is the better curriculum for students and special populations of students. So we've had many teachers using the San Francisco curriculum this year. And of course, we have many teachers who've used the Envision curriculum for some time. So over that January, February timeframe, to gather some input from teachers who've used both curriculum, ultimately make a recommendation to Curriculum Council in March and kind of present all the pieces that we've learned. That's the role of curriculum council. If they're able to make a recommendation, we would then bring that curriculum forward to parents and teachers for a preview, a materials preview. And this, of course, would be a virtual preview. And then finally, we would move forward in May, possibly June, depending on the timeline, a presentation to you about the process and the information that we found, and ultimately would ask you for approval. It's an unusual time to do an adoption. This was supposed to be our science adoption year, which we've stalled for future. But my concern around not having an adopted math curriculum that is used by our teachers and that is of high quality is concerning to me as we get out of the pandemic. So I'd really like us to be able to either say, you know what, folks, we're going to go back to Envision, and this is the curriculum that we're using, and this is what it's going to look like, and be able to do some retraining, or say we've now used San Francisco. We believe it's the superior curriculum. It will look different when we're out of the pandemic and back into a typical school year, but I would really like to be able to have a solid plan to start next year around math instruction, because as you know, it's one of our critical core subjects. Do I have one more slide, Marcy? I can't remember. Yep. So this isn't even like an official approval. You're not approving anything other than we would really like to be able to answer this question and get started on evaluating our options. And as we move through our process over the next 3-4 months, we'll come back and provide you some information through Curriculum Council and through board updates. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to hear public comment.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Sandra. Do any of the board members have any clarifying questions on Jessica?
Just a quick question. Who's represented on the curriculum council?
Well, I'm still putting it together, but it's always teachers, parents, a board member, principals, and myself are out of my department.
How many teachers?
We try to get one teacher from each school site.
Okay.
And we try to get a variety of grade levels.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions before we open it up to public comment? Okay.
LA, can I just make a quick comment that I just want to make sure it's understood. Communication. I mean, math is a rather important subject in our community. We know this for students' futures as well. Communicating this as the process unfolds among our community and among our teachers is going to be really important.
Absolutely.
Okay, I see we have at least one taker for public comment. So we will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is Pepe Yu.
Hi, this is Pepe again. I didn't mean to stay on this long, but this meeting's actually really interesting, so I stayed on. I do want to make one joke just to illustrate my point, which I think Vladimir will appreciate because he likes my jokes. I recall my friend said she was interviewed to see if they should do a Real Housewives of Silicon Valley, but they decided against it because there wasn't enough drama or conflict. And I joked that's because the show producers didn't ask the moms about math, because math is the Silicon Valley third rail. Like, you just don't touch that subject. So having made that point, I would just say, like, I think if you're going to make changes, it would be really good, to Jeff's point, of really explaining to the parents of why Envision was problematic and why the SF program is superior. and what it kind of gives us, and to explain the rationale. I just know that among the parents, there's just continued conversation about how the math curriculum needs to be stronger. And from my view, I do think the math curriculum currently during the pandemic is much more standardized, and I can see that myself. I do think it's very strong in explaining concept, but it's not, I think there's not enough practicum, right? The kind of just doing it repetitively. And I think that repetition actually builds understanding as much as explaining concepts. Anyway, that's beside the point, but I know like lots of parents have lots of opinions about math. It is the third rail. It is what, it is how parents will flip tables if we were on a, reality TV show. So, so I think just kind of that communication is going to be extremely important, like Jeff said. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pepe.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised for public comment, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment at this point. Would any board members like to provide comment on this agenda item? Steve and then Brian.
I just have more of a question. We adopted Envision at one point, and then the teachers took it away from it, sounds like. And my question is, how does that happen? How do we end up in a position where everyone starts to recreate their own curriculum? Is it a feedback loop that's not working? How do we end up in this place?
I would say it's a bit of a history lesson for what teaching and learning has looked like. I think when I came into the district, it was very much a teacher-centered curriculum, which is amazing. And we've done a lot of work. We did not have a standardized English language arts curriculum. We had an adopted math curriculum, but that's not necessarily true that people used the adopted curriculum. So it's really finding that nice balance of having a high quality curriculum that teachers want to use, which I think, we've really been able to find with our ELA curriculum and the units of study. And it's, taken us some time, but our teachers really value that type of workshop experience for students in reading and writing and phonics. But it's balancing that high quality curriculum with teacher autonomy. And it can't be like, I would never want teachers to feel like they had to do every lesson in every order on, the same day. Everybody in second grade's on page 14 on Thursday. Like, that's not what we need. But we also don't want every single teacher creating their own homegrown curriculum. So it's finding that nice balance. And I think it just kind of, I don't know, Jeff, if you have a better answer to that.
I think I do. I mean, I think the why that Steve was getting at is that teachers inherently, and especially our teachers, they want to provide what works for their students, right? They are laser focused in making sure that they are providing their students with the very best. And I would say clearly, this indicates that there wasn't great value placed on the Envision program. So therefore, teachers wanted to supplement that program. And over time, as year after year, as you're supplementing, it probably becomes less Envision and more the supplement, right? And as Sandra described, that is fantastic for those kids in that year, right? Because they are probably getting a fantastic learning experience. But when just pick a grade, when that third grade class at X school goes to the next grade level, they're going to be split among, 2 or 3 fourth grades. And then they've had different experiences than the other third grade classes that are also being split. So it creates really a discontinuity for kids in terms of vocabulary, approach, kind of methodology. So that's what we're looking to kind of improve here, because if we have a solid core, a solid foundation, then that will be used as the kind of the core program, and teachers will add from that, but we'll always come back to the core.
Okay, so 2 follow-ups to this. One is, is there a way to implement a feedback loop, a better feedback loop? So that situation where we find ourselves today. It's one thought I'd like to, as curriculum council putting this together, can we think of that? And then I forgot the other one because it's too late. But if I think of it, I'll email you.
Yes, but I agree. Yes, we need a better feedback loop. And I think we were able to provide that with our ELA curriculum adoption, that teachers had a lot of opportunity. We had coaches to support the curriculum implementation, lots of professional development, and lots of opportunity to provide feedback and to refine skills.
That is the question, to make the ELA adoption work so well. There's a lot of training that went into making that happen.
Absolutely.
And obviously that will be required here for the math as well.
Yep.
So how, I guess it's just something to add to the list for the curriculum counselor to think of as how does that best get implemented?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, the goal makes sense to me, but I'm really concerned about the timing. I mean, we're hearing from our teachers that they're totally overwhelmed mentally and emotionally. So, I mean, I would almost suggest maybe surveying them like before we do any of this evaluation work, just to see if they feel like they can, you know, properly evaluate a new curriculum in the midst of all this craziness and going in and out of hybrid and everything else. And then sort of the same concern for the fall, right? Because in the fall, they're going to be dealing with trying to get a new classroom of traumatized kids who are months behind back up to speed in math. And I mean, I can imagine, I have no idea if this is true because I'm not a teacher, but I can imagine that for a lot of teachers, they would be a lot more comfortable doing that with a curriculum that they've worked with for years and have a library of resources built up for different kinds of kids than if they're trying to understand a brand new paradigm while they're dealing with a room full of traumatized and, you know, below grade level kids. So that's just my concern with the timing of this.
Vladimir?
I just have a quick question. Are there any other alternatives besides Envision and the San Francisco Unified School District for curriculum, you know?
Well, lots of different alternatives, dozens, I would say. But our focus was really on that particular curriculum alternative.
Okay, and do you believe that the San Francisco curriculum is significantly better than
any published
It's not even worthwhile looking at the others then.
Correct.
Okay. All right. It's fine.
Any other questions, Jessica?
Are we questions or comments? I think.
Oh,
comments.
Wherever.
I've kind of lost track.
I don't even know where I am. I think I'm in my house. Anyway, I agree with Brian on the surveying of the teachers about, you know, is it a good time for this? I otherwise actually support this 100%. And as long as there's a good amount of representation on the curriculum council, I feel comfortable with it as it relates to teachers and parents. I do agree with Jeff and anybody else who said we really got to communicate the hell out of this because actually any curriculum adoption has been a bit of a third rail. We hit some bumps with ELA also, but I have had many office hours attended by parents concerned with our math tracking and math curriculum. So yeah, it is definitely, as Pepe said, a third rail, and we need to be very over communicative about this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with all of the board comments. I think Steve kind of hit on something that's kind of going through my head. How do we know that, or how can we assure that when we go through all the trouble of adopting this new curriculum, it won't end up like Envision, where everyone's kind of tweaking it and doing their own supplementation? Is there any way to assure that?
Yeah. I think it really comes down to having the best quality curriculum that we can have for teachers so they don't feel like they need to supplement it.
Oh.
What it comes down to, or at least don't need to supplement it completely, right?
Right. Right.
And I'll just add, I think why our ELA curriculum has been successful is because we have also provided instructional support teachers to help with that implementation and have just-in-time support for when teachers need it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions for Sandra on this topic? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you very much.
And moving right along, our final agenda item of the evening, the 2021 board committees and appointments. The Board of Trustees will consider approving the committee and appointment assignments for the 2021 calendar year. Mr. Baer. Oh, you're on mute.
Shelley, I'm going to toss it back to you quickly. This represents, I believe, the discussion at our December meeting and some follow-up as well. So I believe this represents the requests and so forth of the, hold on one second. Yep, of the trustees for the year going forward.
Great. And I didn't hear any buyer's remorse. So any questions for Jeff on this piece of paper? Nope. Okay, I will open it up for public comment. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. And I don't see any hands raised for public comment, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Would any board members like to provide comment on this? Nope, it's your last chance. Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, so then can I please have a motion to approve the 2021 board committees and appointments?
So moved.
Thank you, Vladimir. Can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there any further board discussion? Okay, seeing none. Vladimir made the motion. Jessica seconded it. We will now do a roll call vote. Vladimir.
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
He sounds so bored. Brian.
Yes.
I too vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. And finally, board and administration comments. This is the time for board and administration to report on non-agenda items such as committee reports, school activities, legislation, and future agendas. Who would like to kick this off? Randy, thank you.
I pass.
I as well pass.
Sandra, are you passing too? Oh, getting slap happy. Vladimir?
I just attended a CSBA webinar on the budget, and I showed up late to Gardner Bullis today and plan to be at Gardner Bullis on the 20th. You know, with my mask, at least 6 feet away from everybody.
Excellent. Jessica?
I went to the webinar, CSBA webinar also, and I was at Covington today on time. I do hope that Vladimir does not show up on Wednesday to Gardner Bullis because no one will be there.
Egan on Wednesday or whatever. Whatever, sometime.
21st. Just sorry. Anyway, Covington was a great experience to see them coming on campus, and Wade allowed me to go into the classrooms at a safe distance to see how the instruction was happening. And it was also a very good experience. It was definitely interesting to see how different it is in these times, but the protocols were 100% being followed. Kids had their masks on. And yeah, I was in a first grade classroom where part of their morning meeting was making sure they knew all the protocols. And it was normal to them and they had no issue with it. It was amazing. That's it for me.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, I was at Springer this morning, and I was put in the corner somewhere off to the left, but that's okay. But I observed the same thing, which was the kids had no problem with mask wearing and those types of issues, and they seem to be, I think, looking forward to getting out of the house. And I know a lot of the parents were looking forward to them being out of the house. So glad that went well.
Thanks, Steve. Brian?
I was at the same budget webinar, and then I was at Santa Rita this morning with many of the same observations that everybody else has made.
Thanks, Brian. I went to Oak this morning and definitely the same observations that all of you made. It was great to see the kids back on campus. Everybody looked so happy. Today, I attended the LASD Equity Task Force meeting. We talked about how equity, inclusion, diversity, how that impacts curriculum, which is an interesting conversation. And then last Thursday, I attended a town hall with Senator Weiner and the Healthier Kids Foundation, kind of talking about what his priorities were going to be. Senator Cortese was talking about his priorities, and just generally was just very interesting. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, if not, I would like to adjourn open session, and I will see you all in closed session. Can we take a 5-minute break before we go into closed session? Okay, awesome. Meeting adjourned. Thanks. Bye.